So now we are online.
Sabri, donc Agnieszka va se connecter maintenant. Elle arrive et alors elle dit qu'elle a envoyé sa présentation pour finir.
Mais elle va devoir,
Oui, bah, elle
va devoir la partager, sa présentation. Partager la présentation. Faire un
Ok,
share screen.
mais du coup, elle se connecte maintenant. Tu pourras faire le test avec elle.
OK.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. So
Hello, Agnieszka.
hi. I sent my presentation to Dominique yesterday because she asked me to. She said it's going to be played by a technician somewhere.
Actually, we prefer that if you are able to share it, actually, for the time being. If you can.
Yeah, I'm happy to share it. I'm happy to share it.
Thanks a lot. For the participant who just joined, just to let you know that we will start in a few minutes. We are just making some final tests.
Hello, Agnieszka.
Hello.
Thank you for your presentation yesterday night.
You're welcome.
So we need it for the technician and for the communication.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, debris. Then we have après tu après maybe so basically it's first sustainability of space. That's and then it's space for sustainability. So we start with I think we have first Agnieszka from Planet. You know, it's a Earth observation company that has like satellites and monitoring the Earth and looking at various things related to sustainability. Then Counet from EUMETSAT. So there is really more weather events, climate and that kind of stuff. And then I would go to your presentation because Asteroids, the way we present it, I don't know if it's the way you're going to present, but we said it's like opportunities and threats.
Yeah, that's what I tried to the presentation.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So it's both, but it's really, okay, sustainability of the human species on the very long term, and then bringing for asteroid mining and show.
I put this last slide out.
Yeah, that's true.
With one slide there. Since there was big enough science, I put some science part where we're choosing asteroid.
No, that's excellent.
And most of the part is about the threat to the Earth and what we can do to stop.
Yeah, excellent. That's the most practical. Shouldn't focus too much on asteroid mining, so it's perfect. And then last but not least, Diego will talk about. So it's very good if you finish with like, okay, then asteroid mining, science fiction, it's like, oh, the future, asteroid mining. And then Diego will talk about transitioning towards being a multi-planetary species. So colonizing the moon, Mars, etc.
No, it's good. I'm finishing a bit there. So it's the last
So it's
slide
perfect.
about
I think it's
I'm saying it can happen in the future.
Yeah.
I'm saying that's true. And gas stations for
I would say the space industry is quite active and quite special.
There is no job where you don't have multidisciplinarity. You have to be curious and to not just do what people ask you to do.
Every day I start working on communicating a new project. It's a completely different work for me.
Every field you can imagine, you can find a way to have an impact in space exploration. The number one difficulty is to find what you really like and what you really enjoy. If you found what you like, then the most difficult step is already done.
So really, go for it. There's something in space that I think unites people. There's lots of countries involved there and they all work together amazingly well. I think it's way more important than we realize. I'm hoping for a bit more women in the space industry because we are not that many, and sometimes when you see panels it's all male and you think, okay, aren't there any great women? And yes, they are. So I'm hoping for a more diverse space community.
And to go further to the moon, to Mars, and so on.
We really produce something which people want. The data our satellites deliver to our end users is something which makes a difference even to everybody's daily life, because every weather prediction you see on your smartphone, on the TV screen, does rely on the data we deliver. And being part of that process, of that organization, is great. My job is to make sure that the original user requirements of the National Weather Services are finally being met by the satellites being flown in space. A user requirement could be, for example, a high-resolution wind speed. And requirements engineering makes sure that the final satellite, the instrument, the ground processing all work together such that the wind speeds which are produced meet the requirements of our users. I think Darmstadt, and especially the area, offers a lot for work-life balance. You can go, in 20 minutes you are in the middle of the Odenwald, in the forest. You can go hiking, you don't see anybody. I personally do a lot of mountain biking there, and I can even cycle to work. And on the other hand, if you want to see city lights, you drive 20 minutes and you're in Frankfurt. And if you want to go even further, you're at the airport and you can basically fly everywhere from there.
I work at EUMETSAT as a remote sensing scientist, and my focus is on sea surface temperatures and sea ice surface temperatures from satellites. So I've always been interested in science and the environment, but I wanted to do something that meant something and that actually helped people. So working at EUMETSAT gave me the opportunity to combine all of these different interests. I think the job I do here makes a difference in the world, as well as affecting weather forecasts. It's also important to understand a changing climate. So we need to know the best possible knowledge of our ocean and the ocean's health so that we can monitor it and then understand how this may change in the future.
So the most exciting and rewarding part of my job is obviously when we have a launch and we get the first telemetry into the ground segment we just built, and we have the first payload telemetry coming in and the first products coming out. This doesn't happen every year, but we are working several years towards such a target. I believe the job I do makes a difference, especially when you watch weather forecasts on the TV in the evening, which is made with images or data we provide from EUMETSAT. And also, for example, in the recent hurricane events in Florida, we provided support to NOAA to do their own forecast and see where the hurricane would go. So I really think it makes a difference.
Since the 1980s, OIP Sensor Systems has been an electro-optical partner for ESA. OIP developed custom-made high-performing optical payloads to provide images of planets in renowned missions, such as Proba 1, Mars, and Venus Express. Our compact visual monitoring cameras are used to monitor the effective performance of space mechanisms and to make scientific images to be studied down on Earth. OIP's spectrometers support ESA and other space partners in planet observation missions, such as Proba 5. Those spectrometers are also used by scientists to analyze the Earth, Mars, and Venus atmosphere on board of Altius, Nomad, and SWAR. If you are looking for high-performance visualization from Earth to space, OIP is your partner by excellence.
Space is part of our lives today, bringing many benefits. In the near future, space will become an even more important part of our lives. Bringing these benefits to us requires numerous technologies to work together. Space Application Services has been developing and delivering technology-enabled services, bringing the benefits of space to Earth for more than 30 years. We plan, prepare, develop, and operate equipment in space for our customers, such as the European Space Agency and NASA. Our strategy is to identify the right question, do the research, and develop the most suitable business solution. Today, we already provide anyone regular and frequent access to space. We open the door to research and manufacturing of novel products that do not exist on Earth. We train the astronauts of tomorrow, and we keep those working in space healthy and safe. We provide technology for in-orbit construction of low Earth orbit space stations and platforms. These will be the industrial powerhouses driving tomorrow's emerging markets, providing advanced materials and medicines. In the next decade, not only will we harvest the resources that are plentiful in space and which are depleted or scarce on Earth, but human settlements in space will use these resources to sustain their independent lives. technologies are improving life on Earth by predicting space weather events that can damage our electricity grids. Our astronaut exercise devices help to rehabilitate injured persons, and our robotics replace humans in hazardous environments. This is the near future. Space Application Services will be a part of it. We'll be happy to work on this future with you.
Travailler au pôle spatial Rue-du-Transine, c'est faire partie d'un espace de travail stimulant offrant de nombreuses opportunités professionnelles. Milieu à haute plus-value, le pôle accueille des entreprises internationales dédiées aux applications spatiales. D'un côté, le centre ESSEC de l'Agence spatiale européenne à Redu. De l'autre, le parc d'activités économiques de Galaxia, développé par Idelux à Transine, qui comporte un centre d'entreprise, un incubateur de start-up, l'ESSEC Galaxia, l'Eurospace Center, le Galileo Integrated Logistics Support Center de la Commission européenne ou encore VitroGSat. Ingénieurs, équipes pluridisciplinaires, start-ups et étudiants, des hommes et des femmes venus du monde entier s'y côtoient chaque jour au sein d'infrastructures modernes et innovantes, d'où naissent des projets de grande envergure, comme la gestion de l'opérationnalité des stations du système Galileo. Travailler au pôle spatial Rue-du-Transine, c'est faire partie d'un espace de mobilité situé au cœur de l'Europe. Entouré de grands axes routiers et le long de l'autoroute E411, le pôle bénéficie d'accès fluides et rapides depuis Namur, Bruxelles, Luxembourg et tous ses environs, en voiture et via les transports en commun. Travailler au pôle spatial Rue-du-Transine, c'est faire partie d'un espace authentique et naturel. Lieu de gastronomie et de patrimoine, la région entourant le pôle offre des occasions de sorties variées, telles que le festival de Chasse-Pierre, la foire agricole de Libramont, Libin et son musée Mudia, ou encore le village du livre de Redu, ses infrastructures sportives modernes, son cadre naturel propice aux balades et ses nombreux lieux touristiques comme Bouillon, Bastogne, Durbuy ou encore La Roche en Ardennes. Travailler au pôle spatial Rue-du-Transine, c'est faire partie d'un espace culturel porté par de nombreux centres urbains rapidement accessibles. Namur, Luxembourg, Liège, mais aussi Marches, Rochefort ou Libramont. Situé à seulement 40 minutes du pôle, Namur propose une vie citadine dynamique et de multiples activités culturelles, musées, théâtres, expositions ou encore concerts. Travailler au pôle spatial Rue-du-Transine, c'est faire partie d'un espace de vie de qualité pour développer un réseau de connaissances et fonder une famille. Logement à prix accessible, proximité de centres hospitaliers ou encore universités, haute école et écoles internationales sont autant d'atouts essentiels pour le bien-être des habitants de la région. Vous aussi, faites partie du pôle spatial Rue-du-Transine. Rendez-vous dès maintenant sur investinluxembourg.be.
My name is Nicolas Hartmann. I've been working for 3 months here at VitroCSat Belgium in Transine as a ground system engineer.
My name is Lise Mouton and I am a recruiter and employer branding at VitroCSat Belgium.
My background is engineering for 5 years, and the purpose of my job is to be sure that there are not any issues with the infrastructure on the Earth for the signal coming from the space.
Well, my background is a bachelor degree in human resources management, and I joined VitroCSat Belgium 2 years ago, firstly with an internship of 1 year and now for the undefined contract.
I chose VitroCSat because I really wanted to work in the field of space, and after my master thesis they asked me if I wanted to join the team, and I said yes directly.
First of all, I was afraid because I didn't know nothing from the space domain, but all the colleagues explained me their job, the duties.
I loved space for a long time now, so I wanted to work in not only for patients, but to work. Every day is different because you don't know what really you have to do. Sometimes you have to plan to go on travel somewhere. Sometimes you have to work on a project.
I chose to join the company because they were open to have a junior profile.
What I really like here, it's a family-sized company, so it's not too big. So it's really easy to talk with people if you have an issue or something.
Everyone knows everybody. We are around the same age, and there is a good atmosphere, good ambience.
They have strong knowledge in the Galileo program, so for a young engineer as me, it's really interesting.
It's exciting to work for a space company. Everyone can have an access to join the space domain, so why not you?
Space and its exploration has fascinated humans since centuries. We send a few space probes in the solar system. We have even sent robots and rovers on Mars surface to explore it. And we even had a few city trips on the moon. We also have people living in space in the International Space Agency every day since a couple of years now. But the next step, the step further to learn more about space, is definitely to go on Mars and to have manned exploration of Mars. How easy is it? Can we just take our lunch packet with us and go on Mars? No, definitely we cannot do that. Because we need, for our life, oxygen, water and food. And those elements represent massive amount of weight that we cannot just send on Mars. So we need to recycle the true waste to be able to sustain their life during space exploration, long-term space exploration. And this was the idea that was developed in the MELISA project by the European Space Agency 25 years ago now. In the MELISA project, the scientists are trying to build an artificial ecosystem that will allow recycling all true waste, urine, CO2, but also fecal materials if needed, to produce oxygen, water and food to sustain life of crew during years of mission. In the University of Mons, we are working on oxygen production based on cyanobacteria using different nitrogen sources. The University of Mons also participate to this space exploration and try to develop new methods to follow and optimize oxygen production by those microorganisms. Those projects also have a lot of application on Earth, because treating nitrogen waste, urine for example, using cyanobacteria is also a major challenge for space, but also for Earth application. If you want to learn more about this, just follow my talk about the MELISA project and the human's implication in producing oxygen in space using cyanobacteria. See you.
Just to let you know that we don't hear anything, the microphone is muted. Still nothing. I think the account of the technician is on mute. I just asked him to unmute. If you hear me in Palais d'Egmont.
It's okay. It's okay. Okay. For the third time. Okay, let's go. Go on.
So, Ozgur Karatekin from Royal Observatory, Belgium. I have started as an engineer, aeronautical engineer. I did my BS and MSc in Ankara, Turkey. Then I went to Karman Institute in Belgium for a master. Then did a PhD together with ULB. I was working my PhD more on the atmospheric entry of probes, Mars and Earth. And then that let me go to observatory relation to the planets.
And who comes to interest in space? When?
Actually, it was when I think I started my master.
At that moment?
Yes.
So this is the good moment to choose, maybe.
I think, yeah, it's a good moment, but any moment I think is good.
Okay, let's go. I will ask to Bernd. What is your part?
Should I take this?
No, you can.
Okay. Yeah, hi. I'm Bernd Helber from Germany, Germany, Stuttgart, south of Germany. I'm in Belgium now since 10 years, almost exactly. There's a bit of an echo. I studied aerospace engineering in Stuttgart, graduated in 2009. After this, I came to Belgium to the Karman Institute for Fluid Dynamics for the master after master level, the research master in fluid dynamics. And after that, I started there as well, the PhD, also in the re-entry, but more on the characterization of thermal protection materials. So for Earth re-entry, and experimental characterization.
Yeah, and where comes your interest in space? When?
It started before university already. So in high school, I was very interested in math and physics, and that led down into space. So that led down the path into space engineering. Yeah. I did the final year thesis in the Center for Hypersonics in Australia. So that triggered my interest in hypersonics and re-entry. And then I arrived here. Now I'm a research engineer at the Karman Institute, mainly working on space debris characterization, which I will present here.
Okay, thank you. I will ask to you also, Guerric, but just tell me, how come you interest in space? When?
I don't know, it's probably the release of the remastered versions of Star Wars, I would say.
Really?
Yeah. I think that's where it started, and you know, it was very cool to see everything that could happen in between the stars and galaxies and everything. And so I started digging a little bit, and it was about the same time as the discovery of the first exoplanets in '95 by Mayer and Kello, who received the Nobel Prize last year, if I'm not mistaken. And so it was very exciting to see at the same time you had these movies about interstellar stuff happening and plenty of adventures in space. And at the same time, you actually discover it may be true, there are plenty of planets in space. So very exciting times. And yeah, I decided to go ahead I decided to go for it.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. I will come to you to ask you. So what is your name and what are you doing?
Yes,
you
hello.
Students or you're
I'm professional, so I'm Jonathan the Builder from All Source Analysis. We provide finished geospatial intelligence. So we worked, for example, on projects with NGA on monitoring and identifying military infrastructure in North Korea. But we're also working on ecology, like the deforestation of the Amazon forest. And of course, ecology plays an important role in Europe with the Green Deal. So.
And why did you come?
Well, I'm coming here to know more about the Green Deal, to know more about ecology and the impact it could have for a finished analysis. So that's something new for me.
Okay, and we have good speakers. Okay, young professional or students?
I actually share office with Bernd Helber. I recently finished my PhD on the entry of meteors. So it's been a while since I'm working also in the space applications. And I'm here mainly, I'm interested in this topic. I think it's quite nice to see space and green applications.
And what are your future projects?
Well, for now, I'll stay at TKI, also working on some projects with Bernd, and then I will see what the future brings.
You don't know already?
No, not yet. Thank you.
Oops, sorry. And you, students or young professionals?
I'm a student. I'm not from space, actually. I'm from turbo machinery. I also work with Bernd, not with Bernd, but in the same place. And I'm very interested in green applications in general.
You have projects for your future?
I'm finishing my PhD, and then I would like to switch a bit more for green energy.
You have to think earlier because it's going very quickly. And you?
Hi. In fact, I'm a second year bachelor student at ULB. I'm studying engineering, electromechanical engineering, and I plan to orient myself to aerospace.
Okay. And you have plans for the future?
I'm working with some researcher from the VKI and other laboratories on the research, but for now I'm just evaluating my opportunities around the space industry.
Okay, you are looking for the space industry in the future. Okay, thanks. And you?
Hi, I am both a young professional and a student. I am an environmental consultant working mainly on impact assessment and permitting for large industrial projects, but I'm also enrolled at the KU Leuven in the Master of Space Studies.
Okay, fine. And project for your future?
I would like to maybe play a role in making space exploitation and exploitation of space resources more sustainable, so we can keep doing it in the future without inadvertent impacts for space exploration, but also here on Earth.
Okay, and why did you come here? To see switch?
Well, because today it is the combination of both climate, so my professional field, and my studies, so quite interesting.
Okay, fine. Thank you. Okay, and you?
Hi. Well, I'm working for KU Leuven as a researcher in climate policy. Yeah. I'm focusing mostly on the European Parliament and how institutions view climate. So yeah, I'm here because I'm a space enthusiast, and at the same time, the topic is very interesting for me. So
okay, and you have planned for your future?
Yeah, well, apart from writing articles for KUL, I'm now looking for a job in climate policy.
Okay, thanks a lot. You just arrived, but okay. Well, you are students or young professional?
Students and both. I'm a trainee in a commission. But I'm writing a dissertation about the climate changes and space. I would like to have an insight from the space point of view.
And you have planned for your future career?
Yeah, it would be very nice to work also at the European Space Agency.
Okay. And so what did you think about switch to space?
I think it's a great opportunity to learn and also compare views on space and initiative on space.
Okay. Thank you. And you will see we have very nice speakers and a lot of presentation. I think it's time to start. And so I would say good evening to everybody. You are maybe most of you are very far. They are in. I just looked before. I checked. You are coming from United States, Israel, India, Colombia, Algeria, and many other countries in Europe. So and also of Belgium, of course. So we have today, I've just checked, it was 200, let me see, because they're not my glasses, 241 registration. So this is really nice because space links us beyond the borders, and this is really great. So I would like to explain to you that this event, Switch to Space, it's the second edition, but this event is really made for you, students and young professionals. And I will explain why. Well, 2 years ago, we realized when we have been in numerous universities that most of you love to see movies on space and pictures from space, love to see launches of new rockets, and you love to see astronauts working on a rocket. But many of you, too many of you, don't think to embark on a career in the space sector. And this is really strange. This is really strange. And it's also unfortunate as the sector is in good shape and continues to actively recruit. So where is the problem? You are attracted by space, but you don't think to work in the space sector. And so I decided I will give you my idea. It's 2 reasons. For me, there are 2 main reasons. The first one is that the sector is too discreet and lives too much into its inner cycle. And the second one, the career perspective within space really expand today into many, many fields. Medicine, agronomy, biology, economy, defense, security, law, application. And the diversity of its scope, it's not yet well known. And it's still difficult for students today to find an overview on the numerous possibilities of in space. And that's the reason why the super Belgium Switch team decided to launch this second edition of Switch to Space. And today, Switch to Space, it's 8 days, it's long, it's 8 days with more than 40 space experts. But today it's the day 4. And this day is dedicated to sustainability and Green Deal. And the speakers will share with you their expertise, explain various opportunities of career prospect in space. They will share insights into their individual path, their job, their vision of the future of space in an accessible way, just to help you to find your way, the best way for your future career. I can say yes, Switch to Space, definitely, it's the key to open the path of the possible. Make your professional life exciting and enjoy Switch to Space. Thank you. And I just continue to present our 2 leaders for the topic 4. So Guerric is alone on board, but just for a short moment, because Olivier will join us after his lecture at the von Karman Institute. So Guerric first. Guerric is Deputy General Manager of ScanWorld, and this is a new Belgium startup. He holds a PhD in aerospace engineering from the University of Queensland in Australia. And before that, he also obtained graduate degrees from Louvain School of Engineering, the von Karman Institute, and the International Space University. After working for different aerospace companies, he dedicates his time to a new challenge in the field of Earth observation. And Olivier, so it will be done, so Olivier will come. Olivier is professor and head of Aeronautic and Aerospace Department at the von Karman Institute. He carries out research in high enthalpy facilities and plasma wind tunnels to study laminar to turbulent transition and gas surface interaction in re-entry flows. He participated in multiple ESA missions, the development of flight testing experiments like the Expert probe, IXV Programmer, and Karman Re-entry CubeSat. He is also scientist, this is nice, he's also scientist in residence at Zurich University, University of Arts for transdisciplinary collaboration between art, science, philosophy, and experimental research. So I give the floor to Guerric. It's up to you.
Thank you, Dominique. Does it work?
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you, Dominique. I'm gonna talk a little bit about why we chose to do a specific topic on sustainability. But before I do that, a quick introduction of Dominique for those of you who don't know her. I got her bio here on my screen, but basically what I know is that Dominique has been a fantastic politician, as far as I know. She was in the Senate. She was actually chairing the Space Group Senate. She has been leading the European Interparliamentary Space Conference, and most importantly, I think, from my perspective, she launched EUSpace in 2014, and it has been a fantastic initiative to get students and young professionals interested in the space sector, and I think it was instrumental in actually reviving a little bit the youthfulness of the space sector in Belgium. Thank you very much for that, Dominique. And then also I see she's currently the chair of RISI, board member of VitroCZ Belgium, member of the advisory board of the European Space Policy Institute, and vice president of the International Aeronautical Federation. And actually you must have a lot of work with the upcoming ISC, I assume? With the upcoming ISC, you must have a little bit of work. Yes. So you're juggling with a lot of responsibilities at the same time, which is quite impressive. So thank you very much, Dominique, for organizing all of this. Before we start with our actual speakers, I'm going to say just a few words, if I may, about why we chose to talk about sustainability. And to be honest, as I said, for those of the people online that were there when we started with the little interviews, Dominique asked me why I was interested in space, and I answered this because of Star Wars. And it's actually true. What I love about space is the idea of going to Mars and exploring the moon and, you know, interplanetary flights and that kind of very far-fetched stuff. So a couple of years back, if you had told me, oh, there is this conference and there is a topic about sustainability, I would have said, nah, I'm not gonna go to sustainability. It's going to be all about Earth observation. It's boring. I don't care about that. I want to hear about manned space flight and planetary exploration and science and that kind of stuff, which is still true. I still want to hear about all this stuff. But now I think that we don't need to restate the fact that we are all aware now has changed a little bit since a couple of years, that we have a lot of issues on planet Earth for human society at large. Plenty of problems in terms of food security, climate change, in terms of population displacements, poverty, etc., etc. Countless issues. We've reached the sustainability limit of the planet. And now if you ask me, if I was a student today and I would have seen the Switch to Space program, I would have said, I'm going to go to sustainability. Because actually, it's fantastically exciting. You can both work on your passion, which is space, work on satellite, work on super cool systems in space, launch a rocket, etc. And at the same time, you can save the world, which is quite cool. It's a bold statement, but actually with satellite infrastructures, you can actually have an impact on the whole planet at once, which is very exciting in my opinion. And that's why talking about sustainability is more relevant than ever, especially today at a space conference with young people that are aware about the sustainability issues. And to tackle, so Olivier is gonna come soon, but Olivier and I, when we decided to go for sustainability, we thought a little bit about how we could tackle the problem. And the first thing you need to think about is the sustainability of space activities themselves. A lot of people, especially now with the launch of Starlink, a lot of people have become aware of the fact that space activities themselves may be unsustainable because of orbital debris and so on and so on.
And to talk about that, we are very lucky to have Bernd, who's a specialist on the topic, but we'll come back to that later. But so the first leg of our journey will be, let's first think about sustainability of space activities. Once we are convinced that we can sustainably continue to have our space activities, with a few conditions, of course, we'll investigate how space activities can foster sustainability on Earth. And first we look at today, and then we look at tomorrow. When looking at today, we'll first tackle the very big issue. And for that, we are very lucky to have with us Agnieszka from Planet. Planet is one of the key leaders in Earth observation. They have hundreds of satellites. Agnieszka, you will update us. I don't know what's the exact number today, but you will give us an update on the number. It's between 100 and 200, I would guess. We'll see.
Frankly, I don't really know either, but
she doesn't even know. So plenty of satellites in space, taking a lot of pictures of the Earth, enabling to do a tremendous lot about sustainability, and sustainability in the broader sense. We are not only talking about climate change, but also geopolitical issues and so on and so on. And that's what she will tackle. Then we'll go a little bit more in details on the big issue when we think about sustainability, which is weather events and climate change. And for that, we are very lucky to have Paul Counet from EUMETSAT, who will tell us a bit more about how the EUMETSAT weather monitoring system at large is improving sustainability on Earth. That's for today. Then we look at tomorrow. Because actually it's fine to talk about climate change, etc., but there is another very big threat that doesn't exactly come to mind immediately. It's asteroid impact. When you talk about your friends or families or acquaintances about the fact that they should be worried that we may someday be hit by an asteroid, they will think immediately about Armageddon and science fiction movies, and okay, that's for later. It has actually happened in the past, right? The dinosaurs are not here anymore. So it could very well happen again in the future, and we better be prepared. I remember seeing a very funny comic where you see, basically it said that asteroid impacts are a very nice way of the universe to ask humanity, how's that space program going, right? So we should actually invest in space activities to make sure that whenever we detect an asteroid threat, we can act upon it. And for that, we are very lucky to have Ozgur with us from the Royal Observatory of Belgium. And he will say a bit more about what's the status of the research on asteroids in general. Finishing with asteroid as a threat, but also opportunity, right? What about asteroid mining? And when you think about asteroid mining, you can really go look not for the day, not for tomorrow, but for the day after tomorrow. Like, okay, in general, whether it's climate change or diseases or asteroid impact, etc., the best way to ensure the sustainability of the human species is to be a multi-planetary species. So it's to have colonies on the moon, Mars, and so on. And for that, we'll have Diego from Space Application Services, who's actually working on making sure that when we get to the moon, we can actually build something using lunar material. He will go into more details. It's maybe not exactly accurate, but I think that's the spirit of it. So we'll start in a minute. As you see, we have only 2 speakers here today physically present. Dominique was a bit annoyed about that, but actually I think it's a fantastic sign that we have excellent speakers. So Bernd and Ozgur are based in Brussels, so it was quite easy for them to join us. Paul is in Germany, so what can you do about it? Agnieszka is defending her PhD thesis in Poland. And as for Diego, he may be anywhere between the moon and Mars, preparing to bring humans there. But he will talk a little bit more about that. So without due delay, I think we can start with the first talk. Yes. From Bernd. So Bernd already gave a little bit of an introduction about himself when Dominique was asking a couple of questions, but I'm just gonna repeat so very quickly for those of you who were not there. Bernd graduated in aerospace engineering from the University of Stuttgart. Then he stayed, during his master's, he did his PhD, he did his master thesis at the University of Queensland in Australia. Then he obtained his PhD from VUB while working at IKI, Von Karman Institute. And now he's focusing most of his research time on space debris re-entry in the atmosphere, which means that he's very much familiar with all the clean space initiative from ESA, and that's what he will talk about. Bernd, the floor is yours.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Guerric, for the very nice introduction. And thank you to the whole USpace team for organizing this. It's a really great event so far. And welcome this afternoon here to the first session on site. It's great that we actually can have some people here, so not everyone has to be online. Welcome to the people on the screens as well, of course. And yeah, you all know, or Guerric already introduced very well, the Green Deal, climate change and saving the environment, which is the main part of this session, the main topic and the motivation. But actually not many people are aware that this also holds true or has to hold true for outer space, far off the Earth's surface, as you can very well see in this illustration I took here, where you can see, as I call it, a belt of trash circling around the Earth. And why this is a problem and what we can do against it is part of the next 15 minutes during my talk now. So since you are all aware now that in 60 years we do very successful space flights all over the globe, every nation, or not every nation, but all big nations have joined in, with more than 100 rocket launches per year going into space, delivering probes into orbit, satellites into orbit, or the crew to the International Space Station, or even probes to other planets, as we have here, for example, the Mars Science Laboratory on its journey in 2016 in this animation. However, this is also already part of the problem because we need a lot of energy, a lot of speed to reach an orbit in the Earth. So if we want to just reach Earth orbit, we need 7 to 8 kilometers per second of speed to travel around the Earth. If you go to the moon, it's 11 kilometers per second. If you want to go to Mars, like in this case, we need 14 kilometers per second of speed to get there. So we need a lot of energy, and that's contained in the rocket. And that's why the rocket is made up of several stages. And once these stages are released, we see already part of the problem. They may remain in orbit or in space. They become trash. Now they may be recycled, as we have seen with SpaceX recently. But many of them remain in orbit, as well as do the decommissioned satellites after their lifetime is over. No one thought about what to do with them after their commission or after their mission completion, and they remain there. So this is also true for the boosters. They may fall back on the Earth or just stay there if they reach orbital speed. Why this is a problem is very well depicted in this animation from ESA and TU Braunschweig. We have here objects larger than 1 meter. If we go down to 10 centimeters, we have 30,000 objects nearly, of which only 10% are operating satellites. The rest is just debris orbiting in certain altitudes around the Earth. If you go down in scale, there will be more and more objects. If you go now down to 1 millimeter, you see only tracked, there might be many more, 200 million pieces that are in the different orbits around the Earth. Some of them are close to the Earth, some are more in geostationary orbits farther away from the surface. Now you may wonder, why are there so many objects and why are there so small objects? Obviously, we don't send an object with 1 millimeter in size up there, which might be a screw or a bolt or just a shrapnel. And for this, we can look at the animation done for 2 satellites that collided in 2009 in low Earth orbit. And you can imagine that if they collide with several kilometers per second, it's not only a bullet hitting another bullet, it's really like an explosion, creating huge amounts of debris, which in only a few hours populate the whole orbit they are traveling in and becoming a threat to other satellites. So if they now crash into other satellites, we have another explosion and so on and so on. And that's a cascading effect. And it's called, or it's very well known as the so-called Kessel syndrome. And that may make certain orbits inaccessible. We talked about movies in the beginning and how many people came actually into the space business with movies. And there was a very great movie that illustrated this very well. It's the movie Gravity, where a Russian satellite crashed into the space shuttle. And this happened during each orbit every 90 minutes. And you see here the damage it can cause. Of course, this is a bit dramatic and extrapolated, but it's very well illustrated, actually. If you've not seen it, I would suggest to see it. It's very well done. And this illustrates the problem quite well. So if we don't do anything now, we have not done much about this the last 50 years, the last 60 years. And if you continue like this, certain orbits or eventually maybe all space may become inaccessible because it will be just too threatful to go into a certain orbit or even through a certain orbit into space. So we have to implement mitigation plans, and that's what called the so-called Clean Space Initiative, called into life in 2012 by the European Space Agency, which basically says that a satellite has to be disposed after its 25 years of mission completion. First, we need to have a passivation after service, of course, depleting all the energy sources. And then we need to make sure that this satellite is not a threat to any future space missions anymore. Here we have two main options. I go first into some orbits that you probably all have heard of around the Earth. If you imagine the Earth here in the center, you have the International Space Station at an altitude of around 400 kilometers. It's what we call low Earth orbit, where actually many satellites are populated. If you go further, 20,000 kilometers, we are close to the GPS and Galileo satellites on GLONASS. And if you go even further, 36,000 kilometers in altitude, we are at the geostationary orbit. Here you travel all the time with a point on the Earth. I mean, you observe the same point. You are basically at Earth speed, 24 hours to do one orbit at this altitude. And this is so far off the Earth that the only thing we can do is to remove the satellite by sending it to an even higher orbit, the so-called graveyard orbit. We need a lot of energy to bring the satellite back down to the Earth, but we need only a little bit of energy. You see here 1,500 meters per second of impulse versus 11 meters per second to bring it to this graveyard orbit. So we have a small energy amount to bring it 300 kilometers higher. That's the graveyard orbit. In theory, they remain there for millions of years because here you can imagine that the Earth atmosphere is very, very thin.
To interrupt, this is Sabri. There's a small square in the presentation, and some people are claiming that they. Do you see it? No build. I'm super sorry to interrupt for this, but we see no build effect. A small square in your computer. Is it from you?
I see everything correctly here.
Everyone see a small square in below the presentation. On the right corner below.
Ah, that's
and it's blocking the screen for the others. That's why.
That is sad.
So the people are not watching your present.
Yeah, I can.
Oh, perfect. That would be perfect. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Thank you for telling me that. I guess that should not happen. I stopped the sharing for a moment because, no, okay.
No, it's okay like this.
Now it's okay? Yeah. Perfect. Sorry. I think the idea was clear nevertheless. Now we can bring our satellite into a graveyard orbit where the atmosphere is so thin that it will remain there for millions of years. If you're closer to the Earth, the atmosphere is still very thin, but we have still so much rest atmosphere that the satellite will actually eventually be slowed down and fall back to the Earth. So that's a graveyard orbit where we have safely placed such a satellite over there. However, we have an increasing number of microsatellites. We have CubeSats, mega constellations are planned that will more focus in low Earth orbits. So here we need another mitigation plan, which is brought into place for operational orbits below 2,000 kilometers. We have to design for demise of those satellites. And what does that mean, design for demise? It means from survival to destruction. Actually, at the start of the space flight, if we go back to the Apollo program or even before, one of the main fears of the engineers, or the main problems of the engineers, was to survive the re-entry of the payload or even the crew, if we talk about Apollo. You have to imagine that with this high speed re-into the Earth's atmosphere, you have 8 kilometers per second, or if you come from the moon, 11 kilometers per second. You compress the gas highly during a shockwave during the entry into the atmosphere, getting a temperature of the gas in the order of 10,000 Kelvin. That's twice the temperature of the sun. Now you need to protect your crew, and you need a thermoprotection material that saves the crew from this high heating. Now we want to do the opposite. We want to bring our satellite into a re-entry condition and burn it off. But you have to imagine that, of course, the satellite is made of many different shapes. You have bearings, you have screws, you have reaction wheels, you have panels, you have tanks, and many, many different materials, alloys, aluminum, titanium, CFRPs, glass. So they all behave differently. So it's very difficult to predict such a reentry. And moreover, they're tumbling. It's not stable like a reentry capsule, as you can see on the left image, but they may tumble, rotate. So if average heat fluxes, so your heat flux, the heat that goes into your spacecraft or satellite, is much lower than during a capsule reentry, but you still want to destroy it at this low heat flux. So it's kind of an inverted problem that we are facing now. And what happens if this goes wrong, or if we don't take care of this, can be seen all over the internet. You just need to Google a bit space debris and pieces that can be found all over the globe. Mainly big tanks like this, COPVs, carbon over pressure vessels that are found on ground, but even whole rocket panels and reaction wheels and so on. And it's not a very new problem. Already the Guerrics, Asterix and Obelix, they warned us that the sky may fall upon our heads. I think there it was very utopian, but now it actually may turn true if we don't act and do something against that. So what can we do? In engineering, we have certain tools that we usually make use of to tackle a certain problem. And here, our idea is to use main 3 pillars of predictive science that we call experimental data. This is very clear what this is. We put a thing in a high temperature flow and see how it reacts. Physical chemical models that now describe how our satellite piece reacts in this environment. For example, the melting of the surface, certain reactions of the surface. And all this, we combine it in a computational model. Can be a CFD model that computes the flow field, can be a material code that now computes the material behavior. But this is very complex to be only done for one single material. We want to do it for a whole satellite for the full trajectory. So we need engineering correlations. We need surrogate, easier models that can now tackle all the different materials, all the trajectory, and by this define the risk that the satellite may actually hit the ground or that certain pieces may hit the ground. You see here a breakup altitude of 100 kilometers. We assume the satellite breaks up, and then the pieces are tracked if they may reach the ground or not, where they may reach the ground, and what's the risk that they may hit, for example, a populated area. So my job is doing mainly the experimental data. That's what I focus now in the last part of the presentation. I don't have to say much anymore about me because I think we went twice now over it, but I studied aerospace engineering in Stuttgart. I did my final year thesis at the Center for Hypersonics in Brisbane, Australia, where I did shock tunnel experiments on a space shuttle leading edge model. That was very interesting and brought me first to hypersonic flow. Then I moved more to the material sides at the Karman Institute during my PhD, performing a characterization of thermoprotection materials that are used on spacecraft to protect the crew. And now, as I said, we go to the inverse problem a little bit. Now I'm a research engineer, I'm project leader at the VKI for space debris characterization of different materials. At the VKI, our slogan is training in research through research. VKI has many, many students in several stages. I will quickly give an overview at the end. We have 3 departments: environmental and applied fluid dynamics, turbo machinery and propulsion, and the aeronautics and aerospace department, of which I'm part, obviously, with 4 research expertise groups in aerodynamics and aeronautics, aerothermodynamics, verified and plasma flows. For example, at the bottom, you see a simulation of a meteor re-entering. Bruno is working on this, for example. And I'm part of the thermochemistry group, which becomes very clear if you see this image. So this is our facility. It's a plasma creating facility where we test thermoprotection materials. And lately, we also test space debris materials or space materials, coming back to our space debris problem. Now, what do we want to know? It's kind of clear. If we look at the surface and we want to know very specific parameters, we look at the temperatures. We look at how the material melts or vaporizes. We look at the recession rate and microdegradation and reactions at the surface, but also into the gas phase, what's creating up in the boundary layer, which gases are ejected by the material. We create this plasma by inductive coupling, so we create a very strong electromagnetic field. It's actually the most powerful facility of this type in the world. You see the test chamber on the right. The test sample is about 5 to 10 centimeters in size. The torch is 16 centimeters. We create a plasma flow, so that means an ionized gas, usually air, but we can create CO2 or other atmospheres depending on what we want to reproduce. Usually it's an air reentry, so we would use air plasma with conditions that would resimulate what happens during a reentry flight. And current tests, here we see an example of current tests going on. You have seen in the right images that these are very problematic materials. It's a so-called COPV, carbon overwrap pressure vessel, where you have a titanium liner that contains a gas. It can be a propellant gas, or it can be a gas that actually pressurizes the propellant in a rocket. And then it's wrapped with carbon fibers to keep it intact and mechanically stable. And that resembles very closely a thermoprotection material. So you have resin and you have carbon, and that is very hard to burn off, and they survive the re-entry. So we have those miniaturized materials on the size of 10 centimeters, and we put them in our plasma tunnel and see how they behave. And you can see here a video how the fibers burn away. After 10 minutes, the fibers in the front face are mostly gone, and we reach the titanium liner. And you can see now in the visual observation how strongly the material now demises and ablates. But in this 15 minutes test, here you see pictures afterwards and before. If in this 15 minutes test, we did not manage to destroy the material completely. And this is similar what happens during re-entry. It's more or less on the same order of magnitude in time. And we need to see how we can improve now the materials in order to destroy them further. Here you see a typical 3D printed material. It's aluminum silicate. That's very new, but very interesting because you can 3D print many pieces out of it. We can see these ablates very fast, because we used here a very high heat flux. But if you use a lower heat flux, which is more representative of an Earth re-entry, it may actually not ablate because you form an oxide on the surface, which has a higher melting temperature and therefore doesn't get destroyed anymore during the re-entry, for example. Once we have such experimental data and that's analyzed, we can perform simulations. Here they are done in collaboration with our partner Cenero, often ablating CFRP, and you can see very nicely how he simulates the gas being injected into the gas flow from the material, but also how the carbon is ablated. That's why we have CO production there at the bottom. Or an ablating silica, basically quartz. If we have glass components re-entering, being heated, glass is very hard to ablate as well because it starts melting only at very high temperatures. So we are performing at VKI since more or less 5 years successfully demise testing and demise characterization. These are all the projects. They're mostly funded by the European Space Agency, who has the most interest in this, but with many other institutes, we are working on that, and with many different materials. Several projects are still going on right now. And of course, there are several events and workshops organized, like very important are the Clean Space Industrial Days at ESA, but also the Air Thermodynamics Design for Demise workshop that's being designed with a test case every year. So if you want to come to VKI, there are many possibilities, of course, as a short training internship or to do your final year in master thesis, then to perform your research master in fluid dynamics, usually after you come from university with a diploma. So you get trained directly in fluid dynamics, and then you can perform a doctoral thesis at the VKI, which can be done with any international university. It does not need to be a Belgian university, where you will need another university. And after that, or instead of that, you can also perform a postdoctoral program at the VKI. You can find all these online, of course, but also don't hesitate to send me an email if you have any interest here in any position. There are many nice projects you can work on in the many different departments. Acknowledgements, mainly for the VKI research team. Bruno is here. The demise team, of course, the ESA technical officers, and then the colleagues we so far collaborated with on the space 2B characterization. But of course, there are many other institutes working on this problem as well. And that's it for my talk. And I'm very happy to answer any questions now on the chat or later on in the question and answer session. But yeah, it's a very important topic. And thank you again, Guerric.
Thank you very much, Bernd. I think we have time for 2 quick questions now. And then later on, at the end, we can go back. If you say it out loud.
You need the microphone or?
Do we have a microphone?
Or the question and answer on the website or in the room.
Yeah, but so you have a question? Yeah, go. You can come.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so my name is Jeremy Rabineau. I'm an aerospace engineer, and I have a question regarding destruction of the satellites when they re-enter. I see that, for instance, when you put a space probe to Mars, and you want them to land on Mars, they use techniques called aerobraking, which consists in just braking several times in the atmosphere. Would it be possible to do approximately the same on the Earth? Like rather than re-enter in only one time, do it several times so that you destruct your satellite a bit more at each orbit?
That's what would happen naturally. So if you are in the low Earth orbit, like the International Space Station, the space station needs to be lifted each month a little bit, otherwise it would eventually re-enter. So they slowly come back into the atmosphere and start having a drag and then eventually burning off. But then you still have to make sure, because the high heating will really happen when it has not enough energy to be anymore in orbit and come back to Earth. But it depends, of course, on the orbit. If you have a very eccentric orbit, where what you maybe referred to with the aerobraking, that you only come through the atmosphere a few times, then you go back out into space, and then you skid slower again in the atmosphere, which is fine as well. By this, you don't have much energy consumption, because otherwise you have to deorbit. So that would be an active deorbitation, that you thrust against your motion and you slow down and directly re-enter. But if you do a passive deorbitation, it would be exactly this, that after a certain lifetime they will come back to the Earth. That's what just have to make sure that after 25 years they do this, and then that they burn off during the re-entry. So that has to be made clear, that they have to burn off and not hit the ground during the re-entry. Thank you.
And I have a quick another question, a very quick one. Is it possible to add a thin layer on the outside of the satellites of a material that, for chemical or physical reasons, would make it easier to burn in the atmosphere?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, because that's being studied not with the material around the satellite, but at joints. So there are thermo elements, thermoactive elements and chemicals that you can put on the joints of the satellite, so that you break it up earlier, that you make sure once they get heated around 100 kilometers and below, they burn, and then the satellite breaks up earlier, because if you have it broken up, they are easier to demise. But the problem is, so that's why it's just being studied, but it's there, this idea. You rather want the whole satellite to come in all together, because your risk, if it hits the ground, is much lower as if you have it spread over several. If it breaks up early, you have it spread over many kilometers if pieces come down. That's why usually it's better to keep it in one piece for the safety on the ground. But for breaking it up, it's better to break it up early and destroy it. So if you are sure that the pieces will break up, this is the way to go. And that's just some projects, not at the VKI, although we proposed it to ESA, so maybe in the future there are some projects. But this is, yeah, very interesting.
Thank you.
Very nice. I didn't know about the joints. It's really nice. Anyway, we got a question on the chat, which I think is very interesting. I'm going to read it out loud for those of you who don't see it. The question is from Wassar. What about the role of space activities as a source of pollution for the Earth's environment? This pollution can put the environmental sustainability of Earth in risk. And we'd assume this refers to all the industrial activities needed to put stuff in space, including first and foremost launchers, I would think. What do you have to say about that, Bernd?
No, I agree. We have to look into this problem, and even if they burn up, because that's the next question, if they burn up in the atmosphere, you pollute the atmosphere. So we have to be careful what we put in the atmosphere and which materials to be used. Now we are looking mainly into what burns up easily, but of course you have to consider what is created in the atmosphere if you burn them up. The solution is not to have spaceflight at all with it, which is not a solution, because I think the advantages you have by having satellite observation, meteorological observation, you know much more about climate change because having the satellite there. So obviously we need to do this, but I think you have to be careful which missions are actually needed and which, but okay, this is a very philosophical question almost to answer. So it's hard to decide. So we cannot stop, that is clear. The question, do we need to go to another planet or to another solar system? Many people will say no, many people will say yes, because we always want to explore further, and the next step is to bring back or to bring humans to Mars. Talking again about movies, there's a Netflix series called Away, by the way, where they go to Mars. I don't know if anyone has seen that. But yeah, it's fascinating. It will always be there, but it's a difficult question.
Very good. Thank you very much, Bernd. I think I see there is already a second question, but we'll note it down and we'll take it for the end of the session. Now, I think it's time to go to, so we've seen what we need to ensure sustainabilities of space activities. knowledge as a broad introduction to space activities for sustainability on Earth. I'm going to invite Agnieszka to take the floor. And just to give a couple of words of introduction about her, Agnieszka is currently the Senior Director for European Affairs at Planet, which is the unicorn Earth observation company. She's not Belgian, but she's based in Belgium. Of nationality, if I'm not mistaken, she's Polish and American. She has been working at the European Commission in the Directorate for Internal Market, Industry, Entrepreneurship, and SMEs, and actually also Space Data for Societal Challenge and Growth unit. So that's where she was within the European Commission, working first and foremost on the Copernicus program. If I'm not mistaken, she will correct me if I'm wrong. And before that, she was the office director for the Brussels office of the ScanWorld Foundation, and she has been very active. There is a broad range of things that Agnieszka has done. From what I know, she was in the Space Generation Advisory Council as executive director. She's been involved in World Space Week. She's currently doing her PhD at the Polish Defense Academy. And boom, I'm not gonna read the whole list, Agnieszka, because it's we are all gonna be put to shame. So I think it's enough as an introduction.
No worries.
If you don't mind. And the floor is yours. Thank you.
No worries. I mean, a lot of, you know, when you're reading all these things, it makes me feel really old, because it seems like I would need, you know.
And she did all this in a very, very short time.
I wish. So happy to be able to speak with you guys today, or tonight, or this afternoon. I was really hoping that I would be able to be there in person, since I am indeed based in Brussels normally, but I am in Poland now and finishing my PhD. And those of you who have done it, you know what it takes. And since I am, yeah, Guerric, you do, don't you? And since I am working full time while I'm doing this, it even adds to the fun of it. But I am actually coming to Brussels this weekend, so hopefully there's going to be another meeting or something. I'll be able to get there in person. All right, so I'm going to share some slides, and then we can get to it. All right, can you see them?
Yep, we can see them.
All right, great. Let me just, here we are. So I wanted to talk, we're talking about sustainability, and this is a very much a close topic to the heart of Planet and the founders of Planet. They've actually, Planet is one of those strange companies. It's a very much mission-driven company. And the company has been created not to make the owners or the founders rich per se, but to actually make a positive impact on the world. And these guys came up with a kind of a idea. It's not really an idea, it's kind of an obvious thing, that we cannot fix things that we cannot see, right? So if we don't know something is happening, if we don't know that there is somebody's illegally cutting trees in some part of the country or the world, then there's nothing we can do about it, right? If we do not know that there is a flood somewhere, that we cannot fix it. So the situational awareness of what is happening on Earth, it's really, really instrumental for us to make better decisions. So these guys, you can see them here. So there are three founders actually of Planet. There's Will Marshall, it's the guy in the middle with the phone. You have the guy with the red shirt, Chris Boshausen, and the one in plaid shirt sitting right in front of him, Robbie Schingler. These guys were, they're Australian, American, and British. They were working for NASA, but they all met actually at Space Generation, Imagine. So all of you who are under 35, young professionals or students, this is a really great organization to get involved with and make wonderful contacts and networks. This is actually how I met Guerric. So these guys were working at NASA, and they were thinking, you know, NASA is doing great things, but governments are just too slow and too inefficient, and there's too much bureaucracy and red tape for them to actually move forward. But we have so many problems in the world now with climate change, natural disasters, loss of biodiversity, etc., etc. We have to act now. So they came up with this idea that they're gonna build satellites in a very different way. They're gonna miniaturize everything, because since we've been able to miniaturize computers, if you think about like computers in 70s or something, or 80s, they were like the size of a room, right? And now our smartphones are actual computers, right? Or tablets. So so they're like, if we can miniaturize all these things, why can we not miniaturize satellites? The satellites that are out there, extremely expensive. They're good, but they're very expensive. They cost millions. They're very big. And because they're very big and expensive, we can only build and launch so many. It takes forever to build them. And because there's only so many of them, the revisit time of most constellations, it's 5 days, 3 days at the best, 10 days sometimes. And as you can imagine, a lot of things can happen between spring time. If we're not paying attention to what is happening regularly, daily, then we're missing out, and we cannot make good decisions. So these guys have been working in the garage after work and on weekends, as it is usually done in Silicon Valley. You meet in a garage and you create a company. And they decided to do things in a different way. Lots of guys have been laughing at them, and they thought they were crazy. But they decided to go with it anyway. Here's just a timeline of the company, but this is not so interesting, so I don't really want to go through details of that. Company has actually put together a lot of effort into not just being an American company, but become a global company. So a few years ago, Planet has bought Rapid Eye, or Blackbridge company in Germany. And with that, we have established ourselves in Berlin. Right now, we have probably around 150 people or so in Europe, over 100 in Berlin. Actually, all our satellites are operated out of Berlin. So our mission control, if you're ever in Berlin and pandemic is over, come and visit, because you can see that the largest constellation in the world is operated out of downtown Berlin. We are sourcing lots of components for satellites in Europe, actually quite a lot in Belgium. And our CEO is from the UK. We are a contributing mission to the Copernicus program. We're a third-party mission to ESA, so we're very much integrated into this European system. But going back to the kind of a story, so these guys were thinking, look, if we don't have insights, we're not very active, and we're not making a good decision. So it's very important to know what is happening in the world. And here you have a bit of a kind of an example of that. So we're looking at for instance, the military is looking at a airport, a plane departs, and we don't know where it goes, right? A lot of people have been questioning what happened to those Malaysian Airlines planes that disappeared. And people were wondering, with all this technology, how do we not know where these planes are? Well, we don't know because we're not observing everything all the time. We're only observing things when we task those satellites to do so. Here also in illegal logging, you have the forest, and a lot of things can happen within a few days or a month where illegal deforestation is happening, and it's too late for us to act. So we really think that there is a better way to do this. And so these guys came up with this idea that we need to be able to observe entire world daily. Every day we need to know what is happening everywhere. And so they came up with this baby over here. This is our Dove satellite. It is our kind of signature satellite. The size of it, it's 3U, so it's 30 centimeters by 10 centimeters. It's tiny. It weighs like 5 kilos. It actually weighs less than my cat. Imagine. And its resolution, it's 3.5 meters. We can build 40 satellites per week. And this is a game changer because every time we're launching, and because we are, because we're small, we're launching a bunch of satellites at the same time. So the last launch we had was with actually on Vega rocket with Arianespace. We've launched 26 satellites, and we are able to, when we know that we are able to launch, we can just build those satellites and we can send them. So we're always ready. And because we are kind of vertically integrated company, so we do everything in-house, which a lot of space companies don't do that, right? They either, for instance, specialize in manufacturing and then they sell the satellites to operators, or somebody just operates them. We do everything in-house. So we do R&D, we manufacture, we operate, we do data processing, and that allows us to tweak those satellites all the time. So every time we have a launch, we launch a better kind of type of satellite that we launched last time. So there's always the top technology out there in space. Whereas with those big satellites, which again are very, very useful, but that model is very different. From actually an idea to a launch, it's usually 7 years, 6-7 years. So, and if those satellites operate for 10 years, you have a 15-year-old technology up there, right? And in 15 years, as you can imagine, a lot of things can change. So we actually try to have the newest technology up there all the time. So here's what it looks like. We have actually launched all these satellites, and what they do, they are forming this kind of a belt around planet Earth, and they're passive. So these satellites we cannot task. They are in the sun synchronous orbit, and Earth inside of it obviously turns. So it's kind of like the Earth is going through a scanner. So what happens is that each satellite takes a strip, and then Earth moves a little bit, and next satellite takes a strip, takes a strip, takes a strip. And that means that we're able within 24 hours to observe, to take a picture of every place on Earth. And so we have that sort of daily imagery, and nobody else is doing that so far yet. I'm sure that it's going to happen, but right now we are scanning the Earth daily, and it is very, very useful. So I want to show you this launch. This was the biggest launch ever on ISRO Indian rocket, where 104 satellites were launched. 88 of those were ours. Those are our satellites, by the way. And I'm always like, I feel really weird when I watch this because it doesn't look very glamorous. It's just like they're throwing them out of the window. But apparently this is how launches work. So here's what we have. So those are the Rapid Eye satellites that I was telling you about, that we bought that company. We have actually just retired those like about 6 months ago, and we are deorbiting those. They are coming down. We have around, we put 160 plus because I don't exactly know, to be honest. We've just launched satellite. We're launching again next week with Rocket Lab. We're always launching, so it's hard to keep up. But we have, 160 or so of those that are scanning the Earth. But we also have Skysat satellites. We have 21 of those. These are larger. They're the size of I would say, small refrigerator, 120 kilos or so. And these satellites have 50 centimeter resolution. They can take videos up to 90 seconds, and you can task them. So it works really nice with the Doves, because the Doves are scanning, and then you see area of interest, then you can send a Skysat, you can zoom in at 50 centimeter, and you can really have a nice detail of what is happening on Earth. And by the way, what I wanted to add, I don't know if you see on the solar panels of the Doves, there's a design, there's a painting. So we actually work with artists, because we're weird like that. And our satellites are actually, we also launch art in space. So each of our satellites is different. We work with artists that can actually paint our satellites. And if we actually like somebody a lot, you can also put a message on our satellite. We can launch it into space, which is very cool. So here's some imagery that you can see, what we can see actually with our imagery. The type of detail, the areas where we work, the sectors are quite obvious, but those are just the usual suspects. There's a lot more than that. So you have agriculture, obviously, forestry, government, finance, and many, 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 many more. Here is planet by numbers. I think this gives you a good kind of overview of what we're doing. So we take 1.3 million images every day. That's a lot of data, as you can imagine. And we have taken over 1,200, I'm sorry, of images of every place on Earth. And why this matters, I'm not giving you these numbers to brag. I'm telling you because you can also have a historical view and you can really monitor the change. If you have 1,200 images of every place, let's say of a park in a city, of a forest, you see how it is changing. So you can really monitor that nicely. We have ground stations around the world. And the company is only 8 years old. So also to show, if you are a young entrepreneur, Guerric, you can really, space is the limit. There's lots of things you can accomplish in a short time if you have a good idea and good business plan. So here you can see, the kind of how our satellites are painted, but also shows you that we have had 14 different iterations of a dove, because as I told you, every time we launch, it's a better version of a dove that we've had before. So now we have so-called super doves, and they are actually mirroring Sentinel-2 of the Copernicus program. We've done that on purpose so that the scientists that are developing algorithms for Sentinel-2, they can also use it on our satellites. And so it's just another layer. They're just like Sentinel-2, except the revisit time for Sentinel-2, it's 5 days. For us, it's daily. And the resolution here for Sentinel is 10 meters. We have 3.5 meters. So it's just like a enhanced Sentinel-2, let's say. But Sentinel-2, it's much better in terms of bands, for instance, right? So that's why these guys are quite complementary. So what do we want to do next? Well, we want to index Earth the way Google indexed the internet. What does that mean? It means that all that data is useless if we don't know how to use it. So we actually want to derive information out of it and be able to give solutions to the end users, because this is what they want. So for instance, you can ask a question: how many trees have been cut in the Southeast Ardennes between this month and that month, and you're going to get a number immediately. Or you can ask a question: what's the best time to go shopping in IKEA, for instance, and based on the number of cars in the parking lot, it's going to tell you probably, Thursday at 3 a.m. But that kind of information that you can derive from that data. So it's a combination of artificial intelligence and Earth observation. Here you can see, the stuff that we're monitoring, and the data, how deforestation in Amazon is actually happening. It hurts actually to look at it. So the problems are real. It shows you how we're tracking ships in ports. But also what I wanted to flag, kind of shifting a little bit, this sort of, awareness, and like monitoring Earth every day. It's not really about Big Brother watching, but it is about giving citizens like you information what is happening in the world. So we actually, all our data, we're the only company, Earth observation company, where all our data is unclassified. So even though we have government customers, you have access to that same data as well. And we also work with media a lot. So for instance, we give them often for free information about what is happening in the world. So when atrocities are happening around the world, when human rights are being abused, and somebody is denying this, like for instance, Myanmar was denying that they were never burning these villages. We're like, well, actually, boom, here are pictures of that or video of that. You are doing it. So we are trying to kind of make our world a little bit more transparent, because we believe more secrets there are, more potential shady business can happen. So more transparency, less trouble. Here you can see, Amazon also, where Brazilian government was denying that this was happening. And then we, you know, had this sort of imagery that we provided for CNN. And at the end, I want to leave you kind of with this thought of what I told you earlier, that we are a mission-driven company. We are not doing this. Obviously, we have to make money because otherwise we would go bankrupt. But money for us, it's a mean to an end. It's not the end. And I want to tell you about techno-utopianism and why you should avoid it. So we don't want to do just space because it's just for the sake of space, right? Just because it's cool. I mean, it's great. It is cool. But this is what Guerric was saying earlier, that in the beginning, you know, he was super interested in like exploration and these things. And this is also fascinating. But then he kind of understands now why this technology is really a tool also, and it actually serves a purpose. And actually Earth observation, for instance, and sustainability go hand in hand. So let's do things in a smart way, right? Because technology can also be damaging. So if you're an entrepreneur or a student that is going to get into a space business, think about like, what is it that you're addressing? How can you help the world with your idea? We looked at sustainable development goals, and we have actually noticed that 13 of these 17 goals, 13, which is like a vast majority, can be helped with Earth observation. So it's not just about, obviously space is not going to solve all the world problems, but it can definitely be a part of the solution. And if you're Will Marshall, you know, our CEO is always saying that if your startup doesn't help any of these, stop working on it. We have so many problems in this world. Our planet Earth is on fire, really. So let's try to think about technology that can really help to make our lives and the lives of our children and grandchildren a little bit better. Because we no longer have to choose between commercial versus humanitarian. You know, back in the day when somebody talked about industry, you thought about these greedy, you know, wolves of Wall Street type of people who would sell their own grandmother just to make a buck. And when you thought about humanitarian activists, you would think crazy people tying themselves to a tree, right? But it's it doesn't have to be the extreme. You can do both. You can find a balance. You can actually make money, be profitable while addressing world's problems. So you can look yourself in the mirror every morning and also, you know, have a good quality of life. I think Planet is a really good example of that. That we found this kind of a golden compromise for that. So, you know, have a ruthless focus on how your technology can make life better, how you can help planet Earth. Because if you're going to identify a real problem, there's going to be demand for whatever you're producing, and you can be doing good and be profitable. So I want to leave you with this thought that, you know, space can really be an extremely useful tool. It's we can be dreamers, but we can also be making a positive impact on the world. And that would be it from me. Thank you very much. Here are my details, so you can contact me, of course, anytime. And I'm happy to take some questions.
Thank you very much, Agnieszka. It was extremely interesting. Definitely learned a lot there about your latest developments, and I think the message that you're giving at the end of your talk was quite inspiring, and also the possibilities to see that one of the major space players today started in a garage 10 years ago.
Yeah, yeah.
It's very cool. We will maybe first see if we have any questions from the audience here live. No. Then I will read out loud some of the questions we have on the chat. We'll limit ourselves to 2, I think, right now, and then we can take the other later. So a first one from Hisham Omrani would be, if the change occurs on a long run, decade or so, does it make sense to observe the change in such a tiny time resolution? So basically, I think the overall question is, why do you need a daily or more revisit time? What can you see there that you wouldn't see with a satellite that gives you one image every 10 days or every month?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think it depends what kind of change you want to observe. But if you're going to observe things like I was talking about, deforestation, for instance, or that happens, that happens like this, right? They can go in the morning and cut 100 hectares of trees. If you want to monitor the damage and forecast also natural disasters, they happen like this. 5 days later, there are no houses left because an earthquake or a hurricane has done all the damage. So for the first responders to react, they need to know what is happening now. If you want to monitor conflict areas or movements of refugees, or the burnings of these, like I was talking about the Rohingya villages in Myanmar, and these sort of, conflict human rights atrocities that are happening now, and you have to be reacting to them rapidly. 5 days later, hundreds of people can be dead. So it's, and also you can see, because some of the things are happening in the long-term scale, but because you have these regular observation, you can actually have a historical data that can then help you to forecast how things are changing, right? How things have been changing from day to day, from week to week, from month to month, especially for climate change. This is extremely important because those changes are happening faster and faster. It's something that we can't really neglect. Also, when you monitoring for biodiversity loss, for poaching in Africa, whatever, it's happening now. In 5 days or 10 days or a week, a huge loss can be done. So I think we need a combination of things. I'm not saying that, what we're doing, everybody has to do that. It's just that it's another extra layer of insights that we're providing for better awareness of the world we live in.
Of course. Okay, thank you very much. Then we have, I think it was perfectly clear. And I think you have plenty of case studies on your website anyway, for if people want to see more examples of why we need a daily revisit rate.
Yeah.
Two additional questions that are kind of the same flavor, and it was bound to happen, right? We had Bernd who told us that we shouldn't put too much things in space.
Yeah, sure.
And then you tell us that you don't even know how many satellites you have in space. So the questions are your satellites designed to be compatible with environmental sustainability principles? And what do you do to avoid them polluting the orbit too much when they are too old or they become useless?
Yeah, I think this is a very fair question, and I was expecting this question to come. So first of all, just because I don't know how many satellites we have doesn't mean that we don't know as planet. I mean, our mission are extremely precise, and they're tracking them. So it's not like we're just launching things in space and see what happens. So I just don't pay attention to these numbers daily. But so that's number one. This is a serious problem indeed with mega constellations. Some would even argue that mega constellations are greatest threat to space sustainability. So this is a very valid question. I think it's very important. By the way, this is what I wrote my PhD on. So this is my topic. I think it's very important to behave as a responsible space actor. Our founders, for instance, so Will and Robbie, are big activists and sustainability freaks, I would almost say. So they care about sustainability on Earth, and they care about sustainability in the space environment. That means that we have to, so those rapid-eye satellites, which are larger, they're about 150 kilo, size of a small refrigerator. They're actually being deorbited right now. It's a process. It's a slow process. They come lower and lower. And so we are bringing them all to Earth, bringing them back to Earth. They're not going to stay in space. We're not going to leave them there. And we actually bring them down because they are still operational, by the way. But they are 12 or 13 years old. And because we have other satellites that provide better insights, we are actually bringing them down because we don't want to pollute and congest the space environment. We don't have to actually do it just yet. So that's with them. With the small satellites that we have so many, they're quite low. They're at 450, 500 kilometers. And they're very small. So they are, due to atmospheric drag, they of course come lower and lower and lower. This is what Bernd was talking about earlier, and they burn in atmosphere. So their lifespan is quite short. It's about 3 years. And some people ask us if we want to prolong this lifespan. We don't, because as I was saying earlier, we want to bring the new technology there on very regular basis. So they burn in atmosphere and they do not leave any trace. Now, other mega constellations, you know, we are the first mega constellation that is fully operational. There's also Spire, but there are new mega constellations that are coming up, particularly Starlink, that is, you know, about to launch thousands of satellites. Also Amazon, and that is going to be a concern. So I cheer them on because I think it's great. They're also breaking some barriers. But I do fear that is going to congest the space environment, and I do hope they're going to do it in a responsible way, because indeed they can pollute a lot. And as Bernd demonstrated in one of the videos, when two satellites collide, all these pieces still stay there, and they still are threatening other operational satellites. So this is and this is why we need norms, and we need best practices, and we need some sort of a code of conduct in space, which we don't have. But from our end, we're trying to be as responsible as we can be. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So there is one more question. We'll see if we have time to tackle it when we are finished with all the talks. For the people attending online, so you can ask the questions in the Q&A. I would advise you to direct it to someone. So please put at the very beginning if it's a question for Bernd, for Agnieszka, for Ozgur, for I don't know who, so that person specifically can provide you an answer. The way Bernd did with a couple of questions that were already there, he answered them offline, so it's perfect. We have 3 sessions to answer the questions, 2 live and 1 online. It's perfect. Without due delay, we are going to remain in space for sustainability today. So we saw that the planet is providing a very generic and global capacity. Now we have Paul Counet, who's going to tell us a little bit more about another very global capacity, absolutely global actually, but a bit more specific. So really more related to weather events and climate. So Paul Counet is currently the head of strategy, communication, and international relations division at EUMETSAT, where he also acts as chef de cabinet of the director general. And in that position, he supports the director general of EUMETSAT in the development and enacting of the strategy for the organization. He also plans and enacts the high-level activities between EUMETSAT and all its international partners, which are plenty, of course, in that kind of very large multinational institution. And he ensures that the suitable information about EUMETSAT's goal and achievements are communicated to the media and the grand public. The grand public would be us today. So without due delay, Paul, the floor is yours.
Okay, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay, then I will share my presentation and start. So can you see it? Okay.
Yeah, we can see it. It's perfect.
So first of all, thank you, and thank you to Dominique always to think to the good old friends. So happy to be here and happy to speak a bit tonight. Bird's Eye's views on sustainable development. Clearly, the perspective from us is looking at sustainability from the top, so looking at the Earth. But of course, we are very, very much interested in sustainability in space also, because we have space assets, so we need to protect them. And finally, we are using scarce resources, so frequencies is also an issue when dealing with the space, so it's very important. So the topic of sustainability is important. So, talking a bit about EUMETSAT and what we do at EUMETSAT, I will first say 30 seconds about the organization. We are representing 30 member states, and what we do is that we operate the weather and climate satellites of these member states, of 13 member states, and our job is really to deliver the data to them, to the National Weather Service, in a very operational way, 24/7, because our users have a duty of protecting life and property. So we are, unfortunately, a public service. So hearing Agnieszka, we are slow and inefficient. So my duty today will have to show you that it could be sexy to work for an administration like EUMETSAT. We did not start in a garage, unfortunately, but we started in a villa in 1986. We were 10 people, and today in the headquarters, and you see on the screen, we are more than 1,000 people dealing with the satellites. So the slide says a very trendy mission statement, because our mission statement is to monitor the weather and the climate from space. Why is it trendy? Because if you look a bit, you are all aware that weather and climate are very important today. If you look at the global risk report of the World Economic Forum, you will see that climate and extreme weather events are the two most important risks, both in terms of likelihood of appearance, but also in terms of impact on the economy. So if you look also at what it means in terms of value, the figure is there, but it's not the figure which is important. What is important to say, to look here, is that the impact of weather and climate-related phenomena is increasing in the period, yes, in the recent time, and therefore monitoring this is very, very important. And it is what we do from EUMETSAT. Then we operate a fleet of satellites. Today we are operating 10 satellites, so it's not a big constellation, it's a small constellation, but of big things, of big birds. 7 of these satellites are owned by the organization, and 3 of these satellites are operated on behalf of the European Commission in support to the Copernicus program, and we are the biggest operator of a Copernicus satellite. These satellites are not looking at the surface of the Earth. What we are interested in is to characterize the atmosphere and the interface between the atmosphere and different types of surface, so the Earth, the ocean, the ice, because this is where we can get the information that we need. So in terms of temperature, pressure, humidity, this is what we measure, because these are the inputs to the models, and this is how we do the weather forecast. We have 2 types of satellite. It has already been explained, the difference between what is a geostationary and what is a polar orbiting satellite. But for us, the important thing is that with a geostationary satellite, we look from far away, but we look very often. So in our new generation of Meteosat that we launch very soon, we will look over Europe every 2.3, every 2 minutes and a half, so 2.5 minutes. And this information will be available in real time on all the screens of the weather forecasters in Europe. So every 2.5 minutes, this weather forecaster will receive an image over Europe. So this is for us very important to monitor weather phenomena which are developing very quickly. And so these satellites, the geostationary satellites, are the satellites which save lives, because it helps you intervening on these weather phenomena. So the LEO satellites, as explained by Agnieszka, they are much lower. They do not see the things very often, so we see the same points of the Earth twice a day. But what is very important is that they see very accurately. And all the data from these satellites are used as input into the model, which are the numerical weather prediction models, which are doing the weather forecast. This is what we do. So an example of what we do with these 2 satellites, this is what happens in the Mediterranean Sea last September. So what we call a medicane, which is a cyclone or a hurricane, but in the Mediterranean Sea. On the top left, you see what we observe from the satellite. For the time being, every 5 minutes, in the future, every 2.5 minutes. This helps the weather service to do the forecast, which is the image on the center. And because you have a good weather forecast, you can start deploying alerts. This is the alert which was given by the Greek Met Service, and start preparing for the bad weather arriving, and this alert was available 48 hours in advance. Second example, what we do with polar orbiting satellites is that at the center of this image, you see a cyclone. It was Sandy, and the center shows you where the cyclone hit the American coast. On the left side, you see the forecast, which was made 5 days before by the European Center for Medium Range Forecasting, which is our sister organization doing the weather forecast. And you see that the forecast was very, very accurate. So it helps the US authority to prepare for this cyclone. On the right side, you see the same model, exactly the same model, which is run, but without using the satellite data. And you see that basically the cyclone stays into the ocean, and so there is no need to take care. So it shows the value of the satellite data and the use of the satellite data in weather forecasting. Another example, because you are in Brussels, so I cannot show something which is coming from Brussels. So it's typically our satellites observe other things than the weather. So this is how we observed the plumes and the smoke coming from the fires in California and how they hit Europe and how they come to Europe. So these are measurements which are made by the EASY instrument on our METOP satellite. And this is coming from the laboratory of Professor Clairbeau in the l'Université Libre de Bruxelles. Other use of our satellites is for climate monitoring. Why? Because we have long series of data. So the first METEOSAT was launched in 1977. So we have today more or less 45 years of data. And at the end of the METEOSAT third generation program, we'll have nearly 65 years of data. So when we were talking to Jean-Pascal Vanniperzel about the use of satellite data 15 years ago, he said, okay, but you don't have enough data for us now. They are used every day by the people doing climate science. And our job as EUMETSAT is to make sure that you can compare, then you have long series of data that are comparable. And therefore, we do permanent reprocessing of this data so that they are comparable. And we use the most accurate software and algorithm which are developed today to reprocess data which has been acquired in the 1970s, for example. So now coming to the Sustainable Development Goal, the fact that we have such long series of data and observation helps you also to support a number of economic area. I've taken the example of the solar power here. So because we know the average installation in several, everywhere in the world, we can plan for the production of solar energy. The same exists for the wind mills and the wind farms, so the production of electricity using wind power. I'm going quite quickly on the applications, but it's to show you that there are a wide range of applications. Also for the monitoring of water. So this is the example of Africa where it helps a lot to know the soil's moisture and the evapotranspiration to monitor agriculture and to manage the water. So in short, and I will close a part of my presentation dealing with the applications. We support sustainable development. We support a number of SDG. We address the monitoring of the weather and the climate, and this is vital for the society. It has also a huge economic impact. So this is one way of being convinced to work with us. It's because of what we do. Now I will show how we do, trying to be even more convincing. And why should you join now? And there I think it was very good that I'm coming after Agnieszka, because it's interesting to join the space business now because the space business is changing dramatically. So everybody's talking about new space. You know this better than I know. For me, it's a bit of a buzzword which covers many, many, many different aspects. So Agnieszka has very well presented the new ways of developing and operating satellites, using new technology, using miniaturization, using technology which are not always space proven, but which does not need to be space proven because they will last in a shorter period. So basically, you can do better, you can do space better, you can do it cheaper, and this develop a new business model. The fact that you do this, you also generate big amount of data, and therefore organizations like EUMETSAT, we are faced with the issue, we are totally in the world of the new IT technology, the big data, the cloud technologies, the artificial intelligence, because we need to use this to make sure that our user gets the best possible service. And we try to integrate everything from the observation to the delivery of the service. So basically, our work has moved over the last year from delivering products to users to really delivering data service. So it's quite exciting to join now because we are in the middle of this. So this just illustrates that we are covering all this field. Why? Because there are many opportunities. So in this organization, we will deploy new generations of satellites. As of 2023, we launch 1 new meteorological satellite per year for the next 10 years. These satellites are highly innovative. They are really based on cutting-edge technologies. And so this is really something which is very fascinating. And we have a lot of scientists which are waiting for the first data to come so that they can make best use of them and go for application. We will also start operating new satellites for our partner from the European Commission. So in the context of Copernicus, we will operate new families of Sentinel, including the one which will be dealing with the monitoring of the greenhouse gas emissions. To do this, as I explained, we'll get much more data. So we have huge big data service, and we are in the middle of having these new data service coming operational at the beginning of next year. So we do it for our own users, but we also do it in the context of Copernicus by operating one of their diets. You might have heard about this. It's called Wikeo. And we are also developing a European weather cloud, which will be focused on gathering all the information from us, the observation, the models from the European Center for Medium Range Forecasting, and the data from the Meteorological Service, so that everything is accessible through a single European weather cloud. And finally, we are looking at the future, and we are looking at new space. So we do not see new space as a competition, but we see new space as an opportunity. And our objective is to complement the observation which are made by our main satellite by smaller constellations. So typically, the example given by Agnieszka is the Sentinel-2 versus the Dove, but we might have a big reference microwave sounder on METOP-SG, which is complemented by a small constellation of satellites. And for this, we are working on this, and we are really interacting with the new space industry to see what we can do in the years to come. So basically, to do this, we need you. And we need you with many different profiles. So we need space engineers, of course. We need IT and big data specialists, AI specialists, but we also need a lot of scientists in EUMETSAT. So on the 1,000 people working here, there are more than 150 PhD doing research on how to use the data and how to deliver a service. Then if you are not in the science part, you can also join us as a lawyer, as a contract officer. So we are a growing organization. We've been recruiting more than 100 people a year over the last year. So and we are still growing to the future. We are thinking that young people are important to us, and therefore we have developed specific tools to recruit young people. We have an early career program. An early career program, what is it? It's a true contract. We offer you a true contract of 2 years. When you come out of university, during these 2 years, you are followed by a EUMETSAT staff with a mentor or a tutor. So it's just like as we do with youth space, you have a mentor which is following you. And then after that, if it fits for us and for you, you can continue at EUMETSAT. For the time being, all the people who started as early career program have signed a permanent contract with us. Other way of joining us, it's for a shorter period. If you are still at university, you are studying, you can join us for an internship. It's a few months, 2 or 3 months, but we take you to do real things. So this is an example of what Rachel did last week. She joined us for 3 months. She worked on us with all the projects that we are doing for and with Africa. And at the end of her internship, she organized a webinar with the African Union Commission, with the African Development Bank. And we had more than 250 participants online. The webinar has been put on YouTube and has already several thousands of views. So you can join us also into that. Now, yes, Dominique has asked to put 1 minute on the bio. So explain you how you come from Belgium and you end up in Frankfurt, having studied in Jean Blou. So I would say it's a mix of a bit of engineering. So agricultural engineer in Jean Blou first, and then the Swiss Federal School of Technology after that. A bit of business administration in Solvay and then in INSEAD, and a bit of international relation in CERIS. So a good background, but what was more important is how did I come to space? And I came to space in 1986, because at that time, Belgium was investing in the SPOT program and had put a bit of money into the university to try to bring people interested in space. And this is how I joined. And this is my first point. I joined because I was curious. So I was curious. There was an opportunity. It was new. It was nice. The image looked good. So I said, why not doing space? And I'm still there nearly 40 years after. So for me, be curious, grab opportunities. Don't be risk averse. Let's try. If you fail, you are young, you will have other opportunities. And most of us enjoy what you do. So if you go every morning to your job, enjoying what you will do, you will find your way without any problem. The small video is illustrating something which is very important in our job, is that when a formalization of all the job that we do is a satellite launch, there will be one on the 10th of November. So if you watch the EUMETSAT website or the ESA website, we will launch the new Sentinel of the Copernicus program, Sentinel-6, looking at the surface of the ocean, parameter which is very important for climate monitoring. It's a joint mission from the European Commission, ESA and us in Europe, and from NASA and NOAA on the US side. And the satellite will be operated from our headquarters in Darmstadt. So if you want really to see the the end result of all what we do, you can watch us on the 10th of November. So I hope that with all this, you are motivated. But if you want to know more, we are very modern. So we are on Twitter, we are on Facebook, we are on YouTube, on Flickr, on Instagram, and on LinkedIn. And we even have a phone number because it still works, the phone. Voilà. So stay in contact. If you are curious, you have many ways of interacting with us. And I'm ready and pleased to answer any of your questions, should you want it.
Thank you very much, Paul. How modern of you to have a phone number. So I think it was very nice to see the nice complementarity between startups born in California and larger institutions in Europe. We see clearly that both are needed at the same time and both are equally relevant. And just what I thought about seeing your presentation is that actually plenty of jobs at EUMETSAT, as I understand, but it also, this kind of activity drives also the whole ecosystem. Upstream, for example, I know that Interspace as a company, he's working on some parts of MTG, so voilà. In Belgium, you have people working on your satellites, and then also downstream. You showed a couple of images from the VUB and that kind of stuff. So it's
yeah, it is true that we develop our satellites through a cooperation with the European Space Agency, and therefore there is a strong industrial base, including in Belgium, which is contributing and working on our satellites. Yeah.
Very nice. We got one question. I'm going to see if there is any question from the audience, but I think there is none. I got a question on the Q&A. I'm going to ask you to answer, if possible, briefly, because we are a little bit behind schedule. So basically, the question, I'm going to read it out loud, is from Fatma Awassa, and the question is whether satellite program may experience significant problems which lead to data gaps, which would result in less accurate and timely radar forecasts and warnings of extreme events. Are you aware of those? Is this a risk that you recognize? And if yes, how do you mitigate weather satellite data gaps?
When you launch and when you rely on an infrastructure which is not a constellation, so we have today 3 METOPS in orbit. If we lose one, of course, there will be less data. So there are lots of mitigation for this. The first mitigation in meteorology is that since the beginning of meteorology, we share the data free of charge among all the actors in the world. And so one of the big roles of EUMETSAT on top of operating and doing data service with our data is also to make the data service from the US satellite, the Chinese satellite, the Indian satellite, the Japanese satellite, the Korean satellite, and everything. So the weather forecaster in Europe receives the data from the entire world. So this is already an element of resilience, is that we share the data free of charge under a resolution from the United Nations. And this helps us a lot. And typically our polar orbiting system is a shared system between Europe and US. So we really share, we can control their satellite, they can control our satellite, we share infrastructure. So it's a way of being a bit resilient. Then when I say, so this is what we do today. And then we are looking also at always getting additional data. This is what I was mentioning, looking at what new space can bring to us. So having small constellation running around our big birds to bring more data. But what is important to understand is that for the type of things that we do, which are really science driven, so we are not looking at the Earth and see if there is a crop or not. We are looking at profiles in the atmosphere that we have to interpret to deliver something. So for us, what is important is not the amount of data, it's the quality of the data. And therefore, when we talk with the business, with the people doing new space, small satellites and things like this, we need to be very prudent, because you can multiply the observation, but if the observations are not good, they will not improve your weather forecast, because they will deteriorate your model rather than improve the quality of your model. But these are the type of things that we do. We are very well aware, and we have to find an impact of the COVID on the weather forecast is, for example, that many observations are done by.
You need to ask me to cut. Thank you very much for your very kind answer. Thank you very much, Paul.
Okay.
Again, the people in the audience, you can still ask questions to Paul, and he will answer in the chat, because I don't think that we'll have time at the end of the session for questions. We're a little bit off track. Olivier just joined us, so Olivier, please come and sit here around. And while Olivier is getting a seat, I'm gonna introduce Ozgur. So now we have seen space for sustainability in the medium to short term, although climate change is long term, but okay. Now we go and look at the very long term. We go look at asteroid threats. And so Ozgur is gonna tell us a little bit more about that. A bit of about his bio. Currently, he's a research scientist at the Royal Observatory of Belgium. He holds his PhD from the Karman Institute and the University Libre de Bruxelles, as most people here, VKI again. And since then, since receiving his PhD, he's been working at the Royal Observatory of Belgium. He is the principal investigator, so the PI of the Juventus CubeSat, and is also the co-chair of the Proximity Operations Working Group on the Hera mission. Hera being the next big ambitious, not especially big and ambitious, but ambitious in purpose mission of ESA to asteroids. It's a contribution of the European Space Agency to the Asteroid Impact Deflection Assessment International Cooperation, which is precisely meant to study study and demonstrate deflection of near-Earth asteroids. He's gonna talk about it in a much smarter way than I can. So without due delay, Ozgur, the floor is yours.
Thank you for the introduction. I start then sharing my screen. Yeah, I just realized that in my presentation, I don't really introduce about the observatory. Maybe I will show one slide about the observatory. Let's start that one. So although I did my engineering studies, I started work at the Royal Observatory and I became a planetary scientist. Observatory is at the Plateau d'Uccle, and it's called the Space Pole. We share the plateau together with our sister institutions, the Royal Meteorological Institute, Royal Aeronomy Institution, and the observatory. So that's the place where we work, and we cover different topics, including reference system and planetology, where I belong, seismology, gravimetry, solar physics, and space weather. There's also planetarium for the outreach, of course. So we have many students, master students, PhD, or sometimes internships. So if you're interested, go to the website and get in contact with the scientists, with me, and with the others, and you're welcome. So now I think I will stop share that one and then share my presentation. Okay. Okay, we'll start with a little animation where you see the double or binary asteroid system, Didymos. The large, the main body, it makes a diameter of about 800 meters, whereas a smaller one, it's only 150 meter diameter. This binary system is the target of the next European Space Agency mission, ERA, that I will talk briefly. But first, since we're talking about the asteroids, I would like to go back a little bit. When I say a little bit, actually we go really 4.6 billion years ago, because those asteroids, they are the remnants of the origin of the solar system. And we know actually from observation of the young stellar disk in the galaxy, the origin, it evolves with a cloud of dust, debris, and that comes with the gravitational forces collapse, and then at the center it gives birth to a young star. When it creates that one with the solar radiation, you get rid of some of the material, but the leftovers, they hit, there are a lot of collisions, and they create the planets. They are still leftover from these processes. These are the asteroids. When I say some, actually there are 1 million, over 1 million asteroids in our solar systems, and some of them, about 25,000, they are really near to Earth object that comes their orbits, they bring them very close to the Earth. And during these processes, one of the main questions is the role of the collisions. So since the beginning, you saw the video, the formation of the planetesimal from the dust particles, these are from micron size, we go to planetesimals, then we create the planets with collisions. Then once we have the planets, then we have this time the collision between these large bodies. Like the example is, you probably know the Earth-Moon system that gives that, the birth of that, to that. And then at the end, once the things start to calm down a little bit, we still have collisions because we have these asteroid belts, and they're still colliding and changing, disrupting, and that's what we see. And we try to understand, as a scientist, planetary scientist, this physics behind. And we see this trace or scare on the face of different planets, of solar system objects. The collisions and the impact of the asteroids is the most common geological process in the solar system. On the moon, you can see those impact craters even with naked eye. You see there is a little moon rover from Apollo 16 mission next to a small crater. We see the Mercury, the big crater. This is a basin, actually, almost the size of Texas. Currently on Mars, we have several rovers. One of them is in the crater, is MSL in the Gale crater. The cratering also, it's important for habitability, and especially planets. I will talk very briefly on that, but these kind of places where, because of the impact, that you can have some water, presence of liquid water on the surface, and hydrothermal activities. So these are important on the Earth and different solar system bodies. And when we go away from the inner solar system, outer solar systems, where we have icy bodies, we still have, for example, on the Europa, the trace of the impacts. Then we go really far, almost the Kuiper belt, there are still the impacts. These are actually the bodies, that's especially the Arocat, is from the Kuiper belt, really slowly rotating bodies, so they're not hitting very strongly, but it still goes on, and especially it is also some of them really from billion years ago, this impacts. I would like to share, since I'm a planetary scientist, very few images, beautiful impact craters. This is the Tycho crater, central peak on the moon. This is the Saturn's moon Mimas with Herschel crater. And most of the craters I was showing that occurred maybe millions or billion years ago, but this cratering process is still ongoing. And we have seen that in '92 when the comet Shoemaker hit the Jupiter, and this was imaged by Hubble telescope. And on Mars, we have a lot of impacts going on. We have satellites orbiting above Mars, and we have recently InSight, a seismometer that's on the surface. And one of the objectives of this InSight is to look at the cratering events on Mars. And by the way, Bernd just mentioned the new Netflix movie, Away. I think episode 8 talks about the InSight. So if you watch that. So anyway, we see these things going on still. And maybe another impressive crater is on Ceres, is one of the asteroids. And then there's a big crater, and we have ice, actually, water that's coming out. So as I mentioned, they have some relations with habitability questions. And on the Earth also, we have beautiful craters. One of them is Barringer, or the meteor crater simply, at Arizona, which occurred, this crater 50,000 years ago. So on the Earth, we have a terrestrial record. We have almost 200 confirmed craters, like the one that I just showed, the Arizona crater. And most of these craters actually, they are young. When I'm saying young, I'm talking about geological ages, so only 600 million years compared to the other planets. So because of the active surface processes, the trace of the previous impacts, they're erased, and we are left with those ones. And among those, I mean, they're really large ones, about from 50 kilometers up to 300 kilometers. Maybe the most famous one is the Chicxulub on the Yucatan Peninsula that caused mass extinction. That was the end of the dinosaurs and beginning of later on the mammals and the humans. So they're making big changes on planet evolution and habitability. Not all the impacts they're caused by large asteroids. We have many impacts that are happening almost every day. Those are usually much smaller meteorites on the size of the meters, but due to the presence of the atmosphere of the Earth, they don't reach to the Earth all the time. And some of them, like what happened on Chelyabinsk in 2013, they explode in the air, they create fireballs. And they have this body, for example, it was only 20 meters, barely, but it had enough energy, about 440 kilotons expected. So it's just for scaling, Hiroshima was 15 kilotons. So that explodes in the air, and then that creates air burst and shock wave that can create a lot of damage on the surface. And these kind of events happen very often. This plot shows the fireballs actually occurred over the last 30 years, and the energy that's involved there. And note that this energy is scaled by the third power of the radius. So if you go from 20 to 60, you go from this airbus to the crater that I showed you to Arizona. So that can be very powerful. And when we look at those asteroids that cause this kind of impacts, there are big ones over 10 kilometers that can create like big, large extinctions. We know most of them. They are easy to spot, and we know their orbits. But when you go to the smaller ones, like the event that I showed, we barely know maybe 1 or 2% of them. So for the Earth, the most imminent danger comes from those asteroids that are less than maybe 500 meters or less than 100 meters that really come much more often to the Earth, and they can create kind of atomic bomb effects above the cities or on the surface. So the asteroids, when we look a bit closer, they come with different shapes, sizes, colors. And today, I mean, the count is almost 1 million. This number is increasing because we observe more and more. And the sizes can change from several hundred kilometers to 10 meters. And some of them, they have small companions. They are binary asteroids. And the classification made mainly based on what we observe from the Earth. So from the surfaces, color, albedo, spectral shape, most of them, they are chondrites composed of carbon. This is about 75%. We have also stony or metallic type of asteroids. They are mostly between Mars and Jupiter in the asteroid belt, most of them, and they still continue to hit each other there. We have some Trojans. They share the orbits with the planet. They're in the Lagrangian point, so it's equilibrium between gravitational attraction of the planet and the sun. So they stay. Earth also has a couple of asteroids in the Lagrangian points. But what we are really interested in is the one that close to the Earth, so near Earth asteroids. So these are the asteroids that the orbit brings them to 1.3 AU from the sun. And we have about 25,000 of those identified. And some of them, they called potentially hazardous asteroids. Well, but this is called when their orbits, they're really close, like about 20 lunar moon distance. And this is, for example, an asteroid in 2018, passed about a 10 lunar distance from the Earth. If it had, it was quite big one, 0.5 to 1.2 kilometers, the estimated dimension, that it will create a really big impact. So the question actually is not if the next impact will occur. From statistics and from what I show, we know that this will happen. So the question is usually, this is like more like when this will happen. So for that one, yeah, we have to look at some statistics and some numbers, and there's several space agencies working on that, like European Space Agency and NASA. So as I said, so you go to smaller diameters, they often, they hit much more often. And the energy increases, of course, with the mass. But as I say, even like events like Tunguska or Chelyabinsk, they're like several Hiroshima. They have enough energy to create a lot of damage. The challenge is coming to observe them and to know them. And the last row shows actually the population of the asteroids. For example, for more than 1 kilometer size, we know most of them. We know their orbits also, so we can track them and we can avoid, yeah, at least we will know what will happen. This will happen. But when we go to the lower ones, then our reaction time will be much smaller because we don't know them. So what is done is by European Space Agency, also NASA is doing the same. We have to put some systems, this is like planetary defense system. So basically we have to detect, that means we have to observe those, and we have to assess the threat. That's been done also together with UN. UN has a special group for this kind of threats. And there's a lot of things going on in terms of the law, in terms of space law, and how the governments, they will work. And there's actually a conference also that makes this kind of simulations every year, every 2 years actually, what will happen if the impact comes. So, and the last part is where we're most interested is the deflection. What will happen? I mean, if can we react or not when we see that it's coming? And one of the ways to see how we can deflect an asteroid. And that's exactly what ESA and NASA is going to work in the next couple of years. So there is a launch of DART mission by NASA next year that will come to the binary system, Didymos, in 2022 and hit the secondary. So it will come with several kilometers per hour. It's only a few hundred kilograms. So it's not going to change too much the orbit, but enough. It will be just changing the orbit about 4 minutes. So knowing that it's about 12 hours, but it can be detected from Earth-based observation. This is happening very close to the Earth, 0.1 AU. So radar and telescope observations will tell us how much the orbit is changed. So this is the first part. It shows about the capability, technology capability to go and to hit an asteroid in the space. It's not easy. This is a target about a few hundred meters diameter. And then to change its orbit. And then we can use the models to estimate how much energy we'll need if such an asteroid is coming towards the Earth. This study, of course, needs to be complemented by better knowledge, of course, yeah, especially the one from the secondary body, which is the mass we need to know. It's very difficult actually to get this secondary mass in such a system. So the Hera mission will come there. It will make a detailed investigation of the crater and the mass of the total system there, also the dynamics. So this will happen, I think, the launch 2024, if everything goes well, and then we'll arrive to the system in 2027. And then we have also some CubeSats there. They can go much closer to CubeSat. They can take more risk. And then one of the CubeSat, Juventus, that we mentioned, we plan with that CubeSat to land on the surface. It will carry also a radar to better understand the interior structure, and also some gravimeter that developed at Aerobraking. We measure the gravity field and better understand the composition and interior structure. This is also together with ongoing planetary missions. There's Hayabusa and Ryugu, Hayabusa and Ryugu, and then Asteroid Threats on Bennu. These are 2 sample return missions. The video shows the sampling from Hayabusa, and that will bring the species together, to the Earth this year. Our Rex is going to take a sample, I think next month, and then we'll bring back that to the Earth also. And these 2 satellites, they're very similar, but we need to know actually how they're formed. And one of the interesting part is we'll use the models. And one of the big questions that come when we look at that, they look very similar, but the hydration levels were very different. So one is wet compared to the other one, which is very dry. And we didn't understand really why, because we expected them, they're coming from the same region, so same body that created. So there was a big explosion, let's say the body, and then the small particles, debris, they come together and they create those bodies. So this kind of models will benefit from the sample returns, and also the sample returns will tell us more about what they are made of, really, those ones, the rubble pies. And that brings to my last slide, where we talk about the resources and raw materials from those asteroids. There's interest, of course, to use them because, they were hazardous. They're coming very close to the Earth, but that's also a benefit because since they're really close, almost coming to Earth, why not? They're really exploitable. We can go and take some materials and work on that. So this idea became very popular in the last maybe 2 decades. There was also a NASA Asteroid 3 direct mission that was hoping to bring a big chunk of material, as you see this below. Unfortunately, this is canceled, this missions, but there are a couple of companies working to bring either the asteroids at the near Earth or on the moon orbit so that we can work with these raw materials. When I say the raw materials, maybe the most interesting one are the water, because they are the fuel for the spacecrafts. But we have also other ones like platinum group metals or industrial metals that can be exploited. Of course, we need to know really better the interior structure of those, how much of these raw materials worth to exploit. And also this is at the end, the economical exercise, how much it will cost to do this exercise versus how much benefit you will get. But even if it's not happening in the next decade, it will happen sometime. I think in the future, this can be the asteroids kind of stopovers for the spacecraft that's exploiting the solar system kind of fuel stations. Yeah, I think I will stop here.
Thank you very much, Ozgur. It was extremely interesting. And what I suggest is for those of you who have a question in the audience here live, we keep it for later, for when we are all finished. And for those of you who are online and have questions, you can maybe ask them on the Q&A.
Yeah, sure.
And Ozgur will answer on the Q&A. It's my bad. I'm not able to stop people when it's so interesting. So that's why we are a little bit behind schedule. But this talk about asteroid mining and in-space manufacturing makes a very good introduction to the next talk of Diego. So we are very lucky to have Diego with us. He's actually an electronics engineer, but a couple of years back, he took part in a very interesting experiment called Mars 500, where they stayed in isolation to mimic a Mars exploration mission. And he actually, that's not the only time he spent time working on living in outer space and performing analog missions. He has also worked for ESA as a consultant in ESTEC, was Caves engineer at the European Astronaut Center, and for the moment, right now, he's at Space Application Services, where he's the team leader for future projects and exploration. So if you remember, for those of you who saw the intro video of Space Application Services in the beginning, all the exciting part was under the responsibility of Diego. So Diego, without due delay, I suggest that you take the floor. And I'm going to ask you, unfortunately, to try to stick to the 15 minutes. Even that may be a bit too much for Dominique, but she's on her phone. She doesn't hear me, so it's fine. You have the full 15 minutes. Go ahead.
Right. I'll try. All right, thanks a lot. And thanks to all of you for the invitation and for being here. So at the end of these 15 minutes, the idea is that you get an idea of why it is important to use the resources of space, and what are the resources that are out there in space, and what are the technologies and the next steps that that we need to take to exploit those resources. So I couldn't have asked for a better introductory material than the one showed by Ozgur. So it's quite related. So basically, the idea is that we as humankind become more resilient as a species by expanding ourselves into the solar system. But the idea is that we don't do it as one shots, like for example, the Apollo mission. That it's probably the most amazing thing that humans have ever done, but it was a one shot, and it was not sustainable, as you know. Yeah, the idea is that we do it, but for the long term. So why space resources? So we on Earth are in a large gravitational well that you can see here illustrated. If you want to get out of Earth, we need to sort of climb this hole in which we are. So if we want to go to low Earth orbit, with all planets, satellites are, it's a climb like this high. If we want to go to the GPS orbit, it's a little bit higher. You have to climb. If you want to go to the geosynchronous orbit, where the communication satellites are, it's much higher. And if you want to, get out of that well, that gravitational well, so you need to spend a lot of more energy. That happens when you go to the moon, when you go to Mars, when you have to go further, like going to some asteroid in the solar system. As you can see, the hole in which the moon is not that deep. So getting out things from the moon is much easier than getting them out of Earth. So when you see a rocket, what it is made of, it's typically between 85% and 90% fuel. So it's pure fuel. So the idea is that what if, instead of carrying that fuel with you, you could extract it from somewhere else, like the moon, like Mars, and not necessarily taking it with you. Say each kilogram of mass that you need to take somewhere else, it means that you have to carry fuel to propel that. For example, if you want to take 1 kilogram to Mars, you need to carry with yourself 226 kilograms of fuel, which is quite a lot. Now, if you want to get back from Mars, for each kilogram of fuel that you used to get back from Mars, you need to also have this 226 kilograms of fuel to bring that kilogram of fuel. So you see that this thing doesn't scale up easily. So it becomes clear that the only way to go and explore, go further, is using the resources that are there in situ. This is not a new idea. This is how humankind has worked since we exist. When we settle new areas, we didn't carry with us the resources that we would use in these new areas. We would go there and use them in these new areas. So we would just carry the basic things, the tools, the equipment, but we would get the resources from those new locations. And if we had to carry all of these resources on our backs, this expansion on the planet would have never happened. A clear example was the exploration of the Americas. When in the first trips were extremely difficult. There There were a lot of dead people. The time that they could spend in the Americas was very limited. Only from the second trip on, when there were safe havens established, where you were to get food, where to get safe water, where to repair your ships, where to even get human resources. Only from then on was this expansion, this exploration possible. So the in situ resource utilization, ISRU, is the extension of that logic to space. So what resources can we find out there? So we can find on, for example, on the moon or on Mars, many resources like oxygen, like metals, like silicon. We can make circuits out of that silicon in the future. Or even the raw regolith, we can build structures, and I will show you a little bit more of how that works. And we have water. That's quite important. We have water on Mars. You can see it from Earth if you see through a telescope Mars. The white stuff that you see there is water that you can find there. And not so intuitively, there's also water on the moon. For many years, it was thought that the moon was dry as a rock, but in the year 2000s, it was confirmed that there's quite a lot of water in the permanently shadowed regions of the moon, because there are comets that are bombarding these shadowed areas that are always cold, and one of the coldest, if not the coldest, spots in the solar system. And that water, that frozen water, stays there and has stood there and accumulated there for millions and millions of years. And today there's quite a lot, and we believe it's exploitable. The applications of those resources are, of course, life support, oxygen for astronauts to breathe, water for astronauts to drink, propulsion for space vehicles. As I said, the rockets, the space transportation can rely on the hydrogen and the oxygen of that you can extract from water. Infrastructure construction, so you can build your home on the moon or on Mars instead of bringing all the bricks from Earth to build your home there. Radiation protection, so you can use regolith to protect yourself from the space radiation. You can build actually things from it. You can build structures, you can build electronics, as I said. So there are plenty of uses for that. Space resources, because of their nature, it's believed that they will enhance the prosperity of humankind in the longer term. They are limitless by definition. Space is infinite or so, as far as we understand. They can make also space more accessible for everybody, including those who traditionally don't have access to space, like developing nations, just by sheer reduction of the cost of accessing space. And will make the difference between going somewhere or going to space, to Mars, to the moon, just for a quick visit, or going there to stay. And well, speaking of sustainability, let's say the long-term objective is that Earth, that we know that it's unique in the universe, sort of becomes the residential area or the light industry area for humankind, and that space can become the sort of the heavy industry area and the mining area, so that we have this nice space that is unique to live in. We have studied the market and the value chain of space resources in the short to medium term in a study that we carried out for the government of Luxembourg. So the conclusion was that up to 170 billion euros can be produced from now to 2045. So that's quite a lot. Let's say the most, we also analyzed what are the easier, let's say lower hanging fruits of space resources to access. One of the conclusions is that the water from the moon was one of the easier things to obtain, and also oxygen from the moon. And now in the medium term, we can use the regolith for construction, use the water from asteroids, use the water from Mars, and probably in much longer term, we can use the metals from the asteroids, which it's difficult, but could even be thought of being brought back to Earth, like the platinum group metals that Ozgur mentioned, that are very valuable on Earth and are plentiful in asteroids. So there are several technologies or groups of technologies that need to be developed. So for us to be able to do all of that, we're developing prospecting technologies that allow us to characterize exactly what is the nature of those resources. Can we extract them? Is there enough? Is it sustainable economically? Mining, so excavating, for example, the resources, transporting, supplying it to different points of the planets, on the solar system, on Earth. Refinement, so transforming the raw material that we get into, for example, oxygen or into water. Storing the resources in certain spots so that they can be utilized. Technologies for manufacturing, so for construction, for example, 3D printing with materials from the moon. And support technologies. There are plenty of technologies like robotics, like communications, that are going to make this possible and that we need to rely on. So speaking of prospecting, one of the key projects is a Horizon 2020 European Union project in which we're working, and is the development of a lunar rover that can go into these very dark areas that are very cold and very hard from an engineering point of view to reach. So it's quite a challenge, but we're designing and building a prototype of the rover that could go there and detect water and other resources that we can use and that are in these craters. The idea also is to make the robot as much modular as possible so that anybody can build their payloads using very well-known standards like the CubeSat standards. And mounting it on the rover, so anybody can design their payloads and they can test it, for example, in the near term in the prototype that we're building, if they want to send them to the moon. So this is the idea of how it will work once we confirm that these resources are there and that they're extractable. There are different ideas on how to extract that water from these craters. One of them is so that one of the difficulties is that, of course, the sun doesn't reach there, and it's hard to get energy to do this extraction of the material. So some people are thinking about the mirrors that are at the edge of the crater that reflect the sunlight into the crater, and inside you have this sort of transparent envelope to which you pass the sunlight and heat up the regolith and condense it in a cold trap, and then you have your tanks of water ready to extract. Another source of the oxygen is in the regolith. So pretty much 40% of what you see every night on the moon is oxygen that is in the form of oxides on the lunar surface. So there are several techniques that we have been working on with ESA to extract that oxygen. One of them is hydrogen reduction, in which you insert the regolith, you apply hydrogen, you apply heat, and so about 1000 degrees, and with that you obtain water vapor with that hydrogen and the oxygen from the oxides. That water vapor, you need to clean it, you need to also electrolyze it, and you get back your hydrogen to continue the reaction, and you get oxygen for people to breathe or for fuel, so oxygen for fuel. So we're designing a payload for the European Space Agency that can do that with this technique. And also in parallel, we have recently been studying the FFC Cambridge process, which it's a little bit different. It works by immersing the regolith into 1000 degree hot salt and running an electrolysis process, and you obtain bubbles of oxygen and you extract directly the oxygen. So we're building some prototypes that do this, and we're designing a payload that in the future will do that on the moon. And the aim in the near term, so between 2025 and 2028, is to produce the first 100 grams of water or equivalent amount of oxygen, take a picture of the water or demonstrate that the oxygen is there for the world to see and to realize that it's possible to do that. And in the medium term, to scale that up and produce many kilograms, many tons eventually of oxygen. Another project in which we have worked is the Regolite project, again, an European Union project, in which we were trying to, the intention was to build infrastructure on the moon in the future. So we were building prototypes that could do that on Earth, and they do it by using the resource that is plentiful on the moon, that is the sunlight, and concentrating it with this big lens into a very narrow beam and scan it over the surface and drawing a pattern. And basically, this is how 3D printing works, which you might be familiar with. So we draw a pattern, we consolidate one layer, then we deposit another layer of regolith, and we consolidate the next layer, and you can obtain eventually building blocks like this, and building your own Mars base, pretty much like this. So you can build these modules that you can assemble, or you can even directly sinter your structure. So the idea is to build this type of lunar bases, to build a moon village in the medium term, thanks to additive manufacturing. We also want that basically robots also do the work for us. And the idea of this project that is called PROACT, that our colleagues from the robotics team are leading, is to, through cooperative use of robots, that they together assemble large infrastructure, like, for example, ISRU plant on the lunar surface. So the robots need to cooperatively, sort of in a smart way, put the building blocks together using standard interfaces. So this is a very challenging, from a software point of view, thing to do. And they're working on that. And the idea is to assemble a moon base, or this sort of gas station on the moon that could extract the oxygen or the water and deliver it to where it needs to go, which could be even the Earth orbit, or communication satellites, or it could be the moon, or it could be deep space missions that need this fuel. So those are some of the projects that we're working on. And over the next decade, I think that, especially from the lunar point of view, hopefully we see many of these materialized and operating on the moon, and making this expansion of humankind more sustainable, and helping us, let's say, make humankind last longer in the very long term. All right, so that will be the end of my presentation. I don't know if there's time for questions, or maybe we need to keep them in the chat.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Diego, for this presentation and to entertain us with this fascinating mission. I'm not sure we have time for question now, or I'm looking to the chairman. Yeah, if you have a question in the room, please. I mean, in the chat for sure. You can certainly go in the chat and ask the question to the speaker, to all the speakers. And yeah, it was like a long session today, this evening. And I take the opportunity, when you are thinking about your question, to thank all the speakers. So thanks for Agnieszka, Paul, Bernd, Ozgur, and Diego now that just make the presentation. It was a pleasure to have all this view on the different view as we were choosing when we were discussing at the beginning. We were carefully choosing, because there is so many aspects that we want to touch and to speak about. So space is very big, and we see that our imagination is also big. So we have a lot to do still. So, and the idea of a switch to space is also to show that space is not only for these people that like technology a lot and they are kind of geek, but there are also people that thinking about environment, thinking about Earth is a natural environment, but space is also our natural environment. And when we are progressing and going toward exploration, then there is certainly something that we learn from our previous history here on Earth that we have to keep on with us to going forward. So I thanks a lot again for this very nice lecture that we had today, which that in fact bring a lot of perspective, because it's not something that you say day to day, it's something, but there is, but indeed going to space is also having this ability or this opportunity to focus on things that in fact that always happen. There is always meteorites around us. There is always all these things turning around, and we do not notice, but they are there. and they are waiting us to take care of all that, and then maybe having the opportunity to have to continue this exploration. So thanks a lot again for this, all the lecturer. Thanks for your attendance, and there is now open for any question if you have. In any case, you can contact the lecturer. You can have, there is on the chat, there is like several people asking for different, let's say, questions related to their future and what they want to do in the future. So be certainly free to contact the people that you have heard today, or contact us. We will try to give you advice or give you any opportunity that we may know. Thanks a lot. Have a good evening, everybody.
Oh, it's closed. Really closed.